I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sunshine Law Statement. All requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been met for this meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Oradell. Notice of this meeting was filed with the Record and Town News, and all persons requesting such notice. Mrs. Norian, would you read the mission statement?
Certainly. The Oradell Public School District is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through comprehensive, innovative curriculum and instruction. The district is committed to providing opportunities for social, emotional, and academic discovery to foster curiosity, courage, and character. Our goal is to prepare our students to become lifelong learners who are self-directed, resilient, productive, responsible citizens.
Thank you. Roll call.
On the roll, Mr. Del Greca.
Here.
Mr. Darian.
Here.
Mrs. Downey will not be here. Mrs. Moran.
Here.
Mr. Nutlin.
Here.
Mrs. Walker.
Here.
Mr. Walsh will not be here. Mrs. Norian.
Here.
Mrs. Nichols.
Here. At this time, I'm going to again make a switch in the order of the meeting. Normally, we would open to the public for agenda items only, but I want to move that public comment to after the business administrator's report because he's going to be presenting the tentative budget, so I'm going to open up questions after that. So at this point, I'm going to move to my report, and we had let the community know that we were open to having an information question and answer session. So if anyone would like to come forward, I know there have been many questions raised in the last few weeks, but if anyone has any specific questions they wanted to ask or in general, and we can just take it from there. And as always, if you can state your name and then just fill out the paper up there.
Hello? Okay, good, it works. Hello, everyone. Okay, my name is Vanessa Gonzalez, and over the past 2 meetings, I've raised some concerns about the critical response process. And since then, I have had a very productive meeting with Ms. Bocios and have been approached by many parents with concerns about transparency, safety, and the school budget. And given that the preliminary budget is on tonight's agenda, I wanted to speak now. While not every parent is comfortable speaking publicly, I agree to voice the concerns that have been shared with me by many parents over the last month. Kids are kids, and it is expected that there will be incidents that pop up. It is how the school is handling these incidents that parents are concerned about. Since the beginning of 2025, I've learned of many different incidents where students' safety was compromised. That is only what I've heard from other parents. It is hard to know what has resulted in overall policy changes and what has not. Parents understand the need for some safety protocols to remain private for the school's overall safety, but we believe that there's more that we can do. And as a counselor myself, and by speaking with educators outside OPS, I know other districts have clear crisis protocols and incident reports that track incidents, they measure data, and allow the schools to identify any trends or weak spots they can address. After incidents, which can vary from big to small, parents typically also receive these reports to understand what happened. And children often get individual support plans, whether they're the victim or the aggressor, to help them improve. We need as a community and school to be proactive versus reactive. Safety should be our top priority, because if our kids aren't safe, then nothing really matters. And if we don't have enough money to hire the right people or budget to implement consistent safety protocols, then we are going to keep putting out fires versus working towards preventing them from happening altogether. I understand that the budget is limited, so we need to identify ways to cut costs. In February 2024, you mentioned that legal costs per pupil from 2022 to 2023 were over 130% of the state average, and these high costs limit our ability to invest in other areas. It was also stated that the board would look for more ways to reduce costs. So we are hopeful that tonight's budget includes a plan to address these legal fees. I believe that we need to take a hard, honest look at our safety policies and resources, and hopefully after tonight's meeting, we can come to a resolution. I will be sending an email with a full list of questions and ideas from parents. And one of the questions that I had myself is, are we properly staffed for our growing school? Thank you.
Before you leave, sorry, thank you for coming up. So you made a comment that I think the board would be interested in, and you said you may not know because other people told you, but I will tell you that if you know of an incident or someone knows of it that they believe that children were not safe in the building, this is something we would want to know. Now, sometimes there are rumors that go on, but I would encourage you to tell anyone who mentioned you to please inform us of what these incidents were, because that is something we would definitely want to know. But like I said, sometimes things are blown out of proportion. We don't know, but have them get back to us. I'm going to let Ms. Bozios speak a little bit to, I know you met with her, but on the crisis management, this is something we do have in place, and Ms. Bozios has talked to the board about maybe just putting out to the public when things something happening like with red light, yellow light, green light. So, and how things would happen. Do you want to talk about that quick? We do have things in place. I know people don't think legally we have to have an emergency plan. There's all kinds of crisis management things in place, but I'm going to let Ms. Bozios talk about that because that's more her.
So we believe that the best thing we can do as a school is to document things. So we have documented protocols of what we do in a crisis situation. If a child is a risk to themselves, a risk to others, okay? I've never thought to put that overview out to the parent community, and as I shared with you, I look forward to putting that together because just like we talked about communication and what's a yellow event, what's a green event, what's a red event. If we as a community agree this is how we're going to communicate if something is a yellow event, then that's it. It's like the code of conduct. You know, we like a clear code of conduct because when this happens, and we all know it and we all agree to it. So I'm looking forward, as I shared, with putting that together and, again, assuring you that we definitely have protocols about crisis. Not only do we have all the required and mandated policies, but we have internal documents that guide our staff, that guide our counselors, that guide our administrators, down to even when they notify me, when I notify the Board of Ed.
And I just wanted to make one other comment with our legal fees. This is something that the community is going to see every year on our audit because we are a one school building district. We have, I think, a $15 million budget. So we are held kind of to the same percentages as, the huge districts. So if you look at our legal fees, I think we budgeted this year, I want to say, like 67,000. I was in the budget meeting the other night. It's broken down by 57,000. So the way they calculate, Peter, do you want to talk about that? The way they calculate is like, even though it's, like our attorney, his fees are the same as, like if we have a grievance, it's the same cost here as it's going to be in, let's say, Paramus or Ridgewood or Hackensack. It's spread over 800 kids here versus, 2,000, 4,000 kids.
That was in the 22-23 budget. The 23-24 budget, the costs were not 130%. They were below. And in this budget going forward, the costs are below 130%. So there are years where it could be above, depending on the litigation that comes to the board. It's not that the board is pursuing litigation. The board has different issues it has to attend to. But those costs were not in 23-24, and they're not in 24-25, and they are not in the 25-26 budget. That was a historical 22-23.
Also, it goes by year. Now, we're going into negotiations this year, so you could see that line be a little bit higher. So there's nothing we can really do about that. It'll also depend on, sometimes we have special ed cases. There's nothing we can do about that. We're going to spend it if we have to spend it. But one of the things we have in place is that the way we keep legal fees down is there's really only two people that can call the attorney. It's the superintendent, myself, I believe the business administrator, and then can the director of special services, Dr. Roth, can. Nobody else is allowed to call him, because that, in other districts, you see like a lot of people can just pick up, no one can do it here. So we do, I just want you to know, we do watch it as much as we can. It's just that our legal costs are going to be spread over 800 kids, whereas others are going to be spent over, so negotiations, one district is going to cost the same as it could here, but we do watch it very carefully. But appreciate you bringing it to our attention.
I just wanted to add something really quick because you
Sure.
said you wanted for parents to be able to bring these concerns to you, or you don't know about these issues that take place, or any safety concerns that are going on a day-to-day. Well, that's what I mean, that there's a disconnection, right? With the school and maybe with the board as well, not only just with the parents, but you should know, at the end of the day, you guys should have a report of like incidents that have taken place, something, whether it was yellow, whether it was green, or whether it was a red incident, right? Because we shouldn't be coming here to share our concerns. You guys should
So
already be aware.
the board
of the
is
incidents,
notified
right?
of any risk assessments that do go out. So that's why, when you say incident, can you like,
Well, any incident, right? Because if you're saying that you're not aware of, like, oh, please come forward, we're not aware of the incidents that are taking
I
place.
guess I was saying it from the aspect that you made it sound like our students have been in an unsafe situation. Oh, you do?
no, that's my point.
Oh,
And that's why Ms. Boches was saying that she's going to create this way of communicating more effectively and be a little bit more transparent, so then you don't have these, and not everybody's playing telephone.
I believe the
Right?
board is informed of all incidents where there would be someone in the safety, but I just don't know.
I think it's how we define it, and that's why we need this
Right.
green, yellow, red document. Because sometimes, if it's a green incident, they may not know. Red incident, if there is a cap gun in the classroom, the board president gets the call before the email goes out even, okay? So, or the attorney may get the call because I need assistance in next steps. So I think by creating that green, yellow, red, we'll be able to better define what is an incident, what are we talking about, because incident is a very big term right now.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Hi, Kristen Genchi, 251 Maple Ave. I have two, I think, pretty easy questions. So obviously, the common thread is better and more communication. The question is, how do we get there? So as parents, we want to know every tiny detail of every single thing that happens. Obviously, there's some stuff that we shouldn't be privy to and stuff that's like not ours necessarily to know, separate from privacy things. So I've searched the internet, I've looked on other school websites. I can't find anything that clearly defines what does and doesn't need to be communicated to the parents. Because I think if we had a better understanding of what we should know, we could, it would be a lot easier. That doesn't feel very clear what can be communicated to us and how it should be. And then there's a lot of chat at pickup.
Well, that's going to be part of this exercise, and I think Ms. Bose will probably do a presentation at a board meeting so people can come see what she's designating as, red, yellow, green, and then we can have the conversation from there.
Okay.
Because then the conversation is, if it's green and it's no communication, we need to have trust that it's green and that's why it wasn't communicated. And I think sometimes by documenting and, coming to agreement on that green, yellow, red, we're all on the same page. So sometimes I think what happens now is, as school administrators, we see something as not a big event because, we've seen lots of things. And so when we don't communicate, it's not because we're trying to hide anything ever. It's because we don't see it as a big event. So this document is an opportunity for us to have a solid, clear slate for all of us.
You might have said this, it was kind of hard to hear from back there. What is the collaboration on what determines that? Is that like a conversation with parents, with the administration?
So
Well, I think it's going to start at the board level in the PR committee, right? And then I think it's going to come to a presentation. Well, you'll probably talk to your staff, I would assume. And then we're going to do a presentation, and then the public will have time to comment on it.
Okay. And then my next question is, we know that obviously we can come to the board meetings, we can speak, we can ask questions, we can email. We also know that we don't necessarily get a response, which I also understand why that is. So what is a better way, or what is a way that we as parents know that our communication to the board is truly being addressed?
So public comment at public meetings is basically public comment, like, it's not a question and answer. But with our board, we do try to answer questions, and if we don't know, we try to get back. We had someone come complain about the water fountains a while ago, and the next day, someone from the admin got back to them. These last 2 weeks, a lot of emails came in, and we're just kind of repeating the same thing, so I was using this meeting as a way to kind of answer certain questions. But generally, if you email the board, we will get back to you. If it is a school-level issue, though, we will tell you, there's a chain of command. Start with the principals, start with your teacher, start with the principals, go to the superintendent. We are kind of like the last one in that, depending on the topic.
Right.
But generally at our meetings, like, we try to answer questions. A lot of boards don't, but if we know, we try to, or we try to get an answer.
So something like the issue over the last couple of weeks, the book, for instance.
Yes.
How do we
You
as
had to bring that
parents-
up, right?
You knew I was going
We're
to.
trying to
Dorothy.
avoid that, yes. Go ahead.
Can you just move a little bit closer to the mic?
Closer? Oh, sure, I was loud. I thought I was loud.
Yeah.
My kids would say I was. Like, how do we know what the conversation is leading up to a vote on something so that we know that, like, voices have been heard and people, and something like that? How do we know what the discussion was? Or is it just not our business to know the discussion? Because I think that's part of what's unclear.
Okay, so I was going to kind of go through what a board is, so maybe I'll do it at this point a little bit.
Maybe I can,
Okay.
so the Board of Education only has authority when they're in the meeting, in this public meeting, this public forum that's been noticed. So there's no discussion, there should be no discussions in between board meetings. So you see the public, the Sunshine Law, you get to see the board deliberating and taking action. So when you want to know what the board, has the board made a decision, you're going to see it only at a board meeting. So, so when you're asking, hey, has the board made up its mind, we can't respond to that because there has not been that decision yet.
So how does I guess then the next question is, what is the vote based on if there has been no conversation about certain topics?
Okay, so I kind of was going to go through this anyway, so.
Sorry.
That's good, I'm glad you asked. So boards in New Jersey are made up of like an odd number of people, 5, 7, 9. A board cannot meet in public. We cannot have an official public meeting without a quorum. Our quorum is 5. So if 4 of us show up one night, we can have the meeting, we can talk about things, but we cannot vote. The open public meetings is that we cannot take action, which is our votes on resolution, not in public. There's only 2 times we can do that. It is on tenure charges on an employee and sometimes a certain disenrollment issue on a student. For privacy issues, those are the only times the board can take action and take a vote in private session. The board can meet in private sessions on other matters. So most boards, almost all boards in New Jersey, work through the committee structure. So the work of the board is done behind the scenes. So like I said, we cannot meet with 5 people, without 5 people in public, 5. However, we can never meet behind the scenes with 5 people without announcing it. It would have to be a closed session, only certain topics, because that means we have a quorum and we're not allowed to meet 5 people or more. So all of our committees are based on with 3 people, and the president of the board pretty much goes to every meeting. So that is where the work of the board is done. That is where discussions are held. So like tonight, you'll see the budget presentation. So finance met when did we meet? Last Wednesday? I don't remember when that was. And we went through the whole budget, we did everything, and then minutes are dispersed to the board members. If they have questions, they can reach out to the chair, they can reach out to Mr. Iapelli, the superintendent. And then by the time we get to our meetings, most of the time we're ready to vote. Now, what happened 2 weeks ago was we weren't, and we should have pulled it from the agenda. So that, I explained, was like a big, whatever, we were waiting for information. So what was your question? Like, so
So-
that's really where our work is done.
Okay, so it's these subcommittees that kind of
Right.
filter down the information,
And
and
they
then
are-
it gets on the minutes, it gets dispersed, and that's how
Right.
people are forming their vote.
And that's where you see on our agendas committee reports. These are our committees, and it lists the chairs. So on our agendas, normally when we come in, we have the Sunshine Law Statement roll call. I always automatically open to the public for agenda items only. And our agenda items are all the things we're going to vote on. Because legally, we cannot take a vote in public on any of our items before we've opened up for public comment. So I'm going to tell you a secret to all the people here, which I wish I could have said last meeting. But at our last meeting, what we really wanted to do was just come out, open the meeting, and vote, because you would have had the same result. Okay, the result was the same. We got the information we were waiting for, we were going to come out. But legally, you can correct me if any of this is wrong, we cannot take a vote without opening to the public. So we opened to the public, and then we took our vote. But we cannot take any votes on things like without opening for public comment on the issue.
Sure, I understand all of that. I guess my question, and I think you've answered it in there, is that how does the whole board get the information to be able to decide how they're going to vote? And it's these subcommittees.
It's through internal communications to the board. It is minutes from the meetings that go to a lot of our stuff is just wrote, the same things that you'll see. We do the bills list, we do the payroll, we're doing transfers, we're doing our building. A lot of it is just normal, we're accepting from the PTA. It's not a lot of different things. We're doing personnel, where you have people going out, coming in, taking classes. Most of the time, it's very repetitious, and we do go through it in committee. So after you've been on a while, you kind of just, and if there's a question, you call the chair of the committee, you can call the superintendent, but it tends to start to get repetitious.
Okay,
But that's how.
okay, thank you.
Does that help at all?
Yes, yeah.
All right. If you think of anything else, come on back up. Thanks for coming.
Hi. Rachel Kogelmass, 640 Blauvelt Drive. Can you guys hear me in the back? I think there's something wrong with this mic, because that's why we moved further forward. Does it come off the stand? Because I just want to make sure people can't hear. Is this better? Yes. Okay. So I just had a follow-up question, because I want to understand a little bit better what you were just talking about. Because on the one hand, you said the work of the board is all in public, but then you've got the committees. And so I just want to get a better understanding of sort of the elephant in the room topic. And 2 weeks ago, we had, I think a good outcome with the vote in terms of clarity and people getting a chance to speak. But I want to sort of go back to the vote that took place before that and understand how we got there and how people would know how the board got there, in the sense that it seems like items were broken down into separate votes when they're usually a block vote. Something had to happen in the committees to get there, and I just want to understand what that process was.
Which meeting are you talking about? The last one?
So at the last meeting, there was a vote on the authors.
Last one.
The very last
Where
one.
it was voted yes?
Yes.
Okay.
But my understanding is there was a meeting before that, which I was not present at, where there was a no vote. And at that one, there was that proposal to break what's normally a block into separate items.
Okay.
I
Okay, I
Did
got
I
it.
misunderstand what
No, no, no.
happened there?
Okay, I got you. So first I want.
I'm sorry, because Mrs. Norian's shaking her head.
So first I want to correct what you said.
Okay.
I didn't say that the board does their work in public. What I said was the board can only take action in public.
Okay.
So we can only vote on items and take action in public, except for those two things I said.
Right, I understand that.
So on the last one, like I said, it was partially my fault. I should have caught it. And then also Ms. Bozio says she should have caught it also. But what is your question specifically as to
Well, it seemed like a lot of the people who came to speak at the last meeting,
the last one?
this very last
Okay.
one where there was a yes vote,
Okay.
a lot of those people were addressing an issue, but it seems that that issue was never clearly articulated by the board as the issue of concern. And so what I'm asking is, as a community, how do we get to the point where if the board has concerns and there's something brewing like there was, that everybody in the community has an opportunity to understand what the issues are, because clearly there were committee conversations, clearly there were board members who had concerns, and I applaud every member of the board for taking this job so seriously that they had those concerns. But how is the community walking in to understand why that got split into multiple votes?
So we talked about the subcommittees or the committees. The committees do the due diligence, ask questions, they make a recommendation. Their recommendation is when it gets onto the agenda. Unfortunately, a few weeks ago, something got on the agenda that the committee had not yet recommended to be put on the agenda. And that's what caused all the confusion. So when things got broken up, it was really because not everything was supposed to be there. It was not ready to take action on and make that recommendation. And unfortunately, it ended up on the agenda anyway without the committee's recommendation. And that's what caused all the awkwardness and why there were certain votes, because people were not ready to yet vote because that information that the committee was looking for had still not yet been received.
Okay.
And that's what caused all this. When the committee did get that information in between the two meetings, the committee then was recommending it to the board for action, and it was back on the agenda. And at that point, it was clear that it was now being recommended, because that gave the indication that all the information was now received.
Okay, because it felt like everything was a little murky, like people were coming and there was a lot of rumors swirling in the community, and there was a lot of confusion because it seemed like there was an action that was being proposed to split up a vote, but there was no clarity or statement from the board as to why something that was always put together was suddenly split.
The reason it was split, I think, is because I'm going to speak for myself now, I think because it was in one resolution. So if we had voted no, everything would have gone down with it. So that's why it was split out. So everything else in that resolution could move forward. That's why it was split out. We could have just voted no on everything because we're waiting for information, but we were only waiting for information on one aspect of the whole resolution. So that's why it was split out, and then we voted because the top ones could go. But I want to answer your question about something where you said, like, how would the community know if there's concerns at the board level? You probably would not to be rude, but like, we do have concerns. We meet in committees, we have concerns, we go through them, we work through them, and then they hit the agenda. So generally, that is not something like we're going to discuss with the public, because it's just, the committee meetings are confidential, we talk about things, and then they come up, and then we vote. And generally, like, everything is very smooth, and we vote. What should have happened last time is it should not have been on there. And then it should have been on the last one, and it would have been fine. But yes, it just caused a whole issue.
Yeah, it just
And very blown out of proportion, yes.
It
yes.
just seems like there was a lack of transparency as to how it got split, why it got split,
The reason it
why
got
there
split,
was a concern.
well, the reason it got split is so the other things in B1 could move ahead.
Right, but the fact that there was a concern and nobody knew what the articulated concern was, I think, is what I'm expressing as
I think
as a
because we
concern
also
as a
didn't
member of
think
the
it was that
community.
big of a deal. I was just like, we were waiting. It wasn't like we wait for information a lot of times. Like, we're always waiting for information. We're always talking about things. So we're always questioning things. So to us, I don't think it was that big of a thing, but it turned into a huge.
Right, I was going to say, the issue wasn't the subject of the information that was being requested. It was just the fact that the information was being requested and had not been received, and that was what made it awkward, because all those things were. This one item was not supposed to be on the group on the agenda, and it was a typographical error that somebody did not notice. It should not have been there. And like I said, it caused a lot of awkwardness and a lot of confusion when unnecessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I guess absent that specific item, it seems like, it's hard for us as a community to react to, like you say, there's an opportunity for public comment before a vote. If members of an involved community need to sort of understand what the issues are, and if there was an issue, or in the future, if there is an issue, it's helpful to have some context. Something just comes up for a vote, people say yay or nay, without context, and I think that's what a lot of people were reacting to, was a lack of context.
I'll tell you, we heard you. Like, we've talked about it. We have heard everybody.
Okay.
So we hope to avoid this in the future.
Okay.
And apologize for any issues it did cause.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for coming, though. Appreciate it.
Jen Allen, oops, sorry. Jen Allen, Wildwood Road. My question is sort of on the same line, but take context of last meeting out. Think bigger. I've been talking for years about curriculum. I've got other concerns too. So if not all boards follow a committee structure, what do other boards do?
You want, yeah.
All boards follow committee structure in New Jersey, all. Some might have a
I
committee of
just-
the whole, but they all have.
I just heard most boards, so I assumed.
I wasn't sure, like, there's two committee structures, there's two structures you can choose. You can choose the committee, board by committee or board of the whole. So board of the whole means that everything is done in public, everything,
So how do we
everything.
vote
So
for
I
that
don't know
then?
if there is
Is there a
any-
way that the public can be involved in voting for
No.
everything done in public? If everything is done in a committee structure and there's very little board conversation, period. Most of the time it's based on recommendation by the student, most superintendent. Most of the time votes are yay. A couple of times there's a no in there, but for the most part, at the end of every vote, it's approved. For the most part, we don't even know, except for what's very line item, little information on an agenda. So most people don't attend or even listen because there isn't a lot of information. So if we're talking like community involvement and showing up, wonderful. Usually, like I said, I'm solo the last few weeks. This is great. I like
You
not
are.
being
We're always
solo.
happy to
I
see you,
know, it's
too.
Great. But there's very little conversation. So I understand like closed session is off the books closed. I'm a school administrator. I get what cannot be shared with public. However, there's no committee notes ever shared with public. There's very little report from committee. It's you have your notes. Does anybody have questions? You've asked each other questions already. So there's very little information, period, given to the public for us to have any context about anything, let alone the last few weeks of then the rumors mill starts. So my question is more, what is the public entitled to? Can we have notes from meetings? If that is not closed and they can't take any action at those sessions, then why isn't that public information? Or why isn't that on the agenda, not just what's to be voted on?
Well, that's what the committee, so the committee makes recommendations to what goes on the agenda. So the agenda is the committee report. So the agenda items
But
are the
it's
committee
not the
report.
report. You said the minutes are dispersed, the committees of 3 meet, the board receives all of their minutes, so all of the board is informed before that vote.
No. So what gets on the agenda is the board, that's the committee recommendations. That's the committee report in the minutes is what's on the agenda.
So Chris Nutland then is trusting what Jess Moran decided at her committee without any information. Sorry to use you both at the ends. If that's just what it is, it's just, we trust whatever happened at your 3-person committee, since you've put it on the agenda and it says, based on the recommendation of the superintendent, that's it?
That's generally how it works. So the committee does all the due diligence, all the groundwork. Superintendent makes a recommendation. The committee, which is 3 or 4 members, that will then make a recommendation, put it on the agenda. So now it's on the agenda. The rest of the board can vote for it, or if they have questions, we could go into executive.
But you know they're not
but
going
if-
to have
but
any
if the-
questions because they already have the minutes.
Then yes, you're right. Then in that case,
So
they're
then the
going to
public
trust.
is never getting any information.
The public gets what you see on the
There's no
agenda.
information.
That's, what's on the agenda is the information.
But honestly, what's on the agenda is the only thing that's happening. That's it. Nothing happens that's not on the agenda, really. So this is it. This is our action as a board.
But there are things that happen, like your public relations, you've talked about your website, it's been viewed. There's a lot of work that happens. I know you guys spend a lot of time, you devote a lot of hours to this. There is a lot of behind the scenes work, but the community has no information from that. We have a line item of what you're voting on, and there isn't discussion amongst board members because there isn't a reason to. I get it, you want to be in and out, you've done your work in your committees, but where does that leave the rest of the public? I've listened to so many board meetings across the state of New Jersey, I'm like, as I'm sitting in my car commuting, and I hear these rich conversations between board members asking questions. It never happens here, but there's no need, and I understand why. You've already done your work, but we don't know that. And we don't have any of the information. And I feel like that's why there is a lack of trust. So If we're not entitled to that information, I find it very strange, but if that's the structure, thanks for answering my question.
Hi, I'm back. David Levin, and I live at 640 Blauvelt. So, my wife a moment ago asked you about what happened a couple of weeks ago, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, you know, and you guys work really hard, and you have reasons for doing what you do. And I asked a question at the last meeting, which was why. So the one thing that we haven't gotten an answer to, because a lot of people showed up that day and made assumptions because of rumors. And you know, maybe it was a waste of time. Maybe it was a waste of your time because they were responding to rumors because they didn't have facts. Facts that you could have easily put on the table, as that woman said a moment ago, to make things a little bit more transparent. We love facts. We appreciate the work you do. We do not want to be in an adversarial situation. We want to work with you. We want to help you. We want to understand why you're doing what you're doing. These people really care. They show up. So many people showed up last time because of a rumor. Do you want people showing up for rumors, or do you want them to know what's going on, what our Board of Education is standing for, and we still haven't gotten we needed more information. Okay, here's my question. What was the more information you needed a few weeks ago that generated the no vote, that generated this rumor? Because for every person who was here, there were 2 or 3 or 10 people watching at home. And they came to me and they were like, oh, I saw you were at the meeting. You know, you had a lot of interest 2 weeks ago. So what happened? And don't just say, oh, we needed more information. What was the more information?
I will answer you. I answered it at the last question, actually. One of the last people that came up asked us 3 questions, and that was one of them. And what I said was subject matter, and then why was the book changed? And Ms. Bozios explained. So I don't know if you want to talk about that at all. But that was it. Age appropriateness and subject matter.
What was the subject matter that was problematic, do you feel?
Yeah, I'm going to let.
Okay, so
I actually. Okay, no, go ahead.
you know me. So
I do. I know you well.
So that item shouldn't have gone on the agenda because the board had asked me a question, and I hadn't had the answer and didn't notice it was on the question. That specific question had to do with, did the presentation require a conflict of conscience opt-out? In the state of New Jersey, anything that comes under health, sexual orientation, or gender identity, a parent must be provided an opt-out. Now, we hadn't planned to do any opt-out, and the board wanted to know, was that required? Would that have stopped a presentation or not stopped a presentation? Wasn't even a question at that time. They just wanted that piece of information.
That's
So
very fair.
We
Okay.
reached out to the author and,
Yes.
and just asked that. And he just hadn't gotten back. We actually asked they hadn't gotten back yet. So we were waiting for it. We got that information between the 2 meetings.
That little 1-minute explanation would have saved you guys a lot of time at the last board meeting, early, beforehand. That's all I'm saying. And I respect what you guys are doing. I respect what you just told me. And if I missed it at the last meeting, that's on me, and I apologize.
No, don't apologize. We're happy you're here. But I do have a question for
Yeah.
you and the public.
Sure.
So, I mean, the board was dragged through the mud. I've been here a long time, so we've been dragged through the mud before. I don't really care. But I do have a question. Why the assumptions? Why assume the worst of the board when this came out?
I made no assumptions.
No, I'm not
which I
saying
s-
you.
But
But we were called there were some serious assumptions made about some board members. So why go to that immediately when nothing was ever put out? Like, why would everyone just assume that?
because we are living in and I said this last time too, we are living in very difficult times, okay? I find that I have friends that I have known since I was in elementary school, and there are certain things we can no longer talk about. There is so much dissension, and there is so much, I mean, look, the cops were here last time, and the media was here because they probably wanted to see some sparks fly, because sparks are flying at town meetings and at Board of Ed meetings and all over the place. So yeah, people are a little suspicious. And so the more you can do to make things transparent, even if you're not obligated to, the better it will be for our whole town. And you don't need to bring a lawyer, you know, sorry, but, you know, no disrespect, I'm glad you're here, okay? But the more we can do to foster trust in this town, the better, so why not? Speak up. If you and by the way, you guys hear rumors, you live in this town, so if you're hearing rumors that something is brewing, why not take action beforehand and say, look, I know that you're all here because of this particular concern, and we will hear your concerns. Let me just say one thing about what happened. Why not? I said last time, why or why not? I didn't make any comments about whether it's sexuality or what. I didn't make any assumptions. I just said why. And that's always my question, all right? You guys work so hard. Nobody really even knows how hard you guys work and how much time you put into this. I appreciate that. You know, but when something happens and when we start hearing, and when you hear words like book banning or non-inclusion, people get their hackles up. That's why. That's why. Yeah, and you know that because we live in this country. We're so happy to live in this country where we have free speech and where we can embrace our neighbors. And now we're going through this weird period, and I'm not going to make assumptions why about that. We're just there. So let's fix it here, at least in Oradell. Let's fix it here. That's it.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Sorry, I'm short. Hi, how are
Mrs.
you?
Dimberg,
Yes.
is she okay?
Am I okay? Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Stacy Dimberg. I live on Beechwood Road. I have 2 children in OPS. One, I just wanted to say thank you for all your service. I have friends, neighbors, my daughter's friends, parents here. So I know you guys work really hard. And I wanted to just quickly comment about what you had mentioned about why did some parents go to that extreme. And I'm sure you guys know there's always a few people that take things out of proportion. However, we heard from board members things being said that shouldn't have been said, alluding to the fact that there was other parents that had brought concerns to the board specifically about content. You mentioned health. Where was health mentioned in Chad Sell's books? Does he talk about health at all?
Go ahead.
It's health, gender identity, or sexual orientation. And again, all it would have meant was an opt-out needed to be provided. It doesn't mean anything would have stopped. I would have put the district in a legally bad situation.
Right, so that's what I'm trying to say. Does his book specifically talk about sexuality and things like that?
If you read the reviews online, and we hadn't read all 9 books. So this was just a safety measure.
Okay.
Again, because one of my jobs on top of keeping all of your children safe is to ensure that I'm keeping the district in a legally safe place.
Got it. And I understand that, and again, appreciate everybody's concern over everything. I think it's really important that, you know, you have that option. Okay, so now my real questions.
Are these ones you emailed to us?
Yes.
Because I have them with me.
Oh, good.
Hold on, let me get my sheet.
So my first question is about classroom overcrowding.
You have to ask me, by the way.
oh, I'm sorry.
And I'm just going to tell you, some of these are school level, so we may not answer, but shoot away and then we'll go.
Okay. So I guess, I want to know what the district's plan is to reduce classroom size. My daughter is in 3rd grade, and she has 26 children in her class. She also has a 504, and I am a former educator, special educator. I worked with children on the spectrum. I'm a seasoned educator. I have a background in behavior therapy. I'll tell you right now, there's no way I would be able to take care of 26 children with all different needs, differentiation, without support. So I commend these teachers who continue to work in this type of environment because I know it's not easy. It's really very difficult. And I know that there are supports, but I kind of just wanted to see where we're going because I think OPS is really just going to continue to grow. So
I'm going to let the superintendent take this. We have discussed this.
The growing is actually not likely. We do have some grade levels, 3rd grade being one of them, that has a large number of students. 6th grade is one of them. There is 135 students in 6th grade because we got 9 new 6th graders this summer. We currently have 85 kindergartners registered. If you've studied birth rates in the state of New Jersey, you will see that most people are talking about declining enrollments. So with regards to your question, I would focus it more on like the overcrowding of a classroom versus the overcrowding of a school. Because I know that there is this belief that we are outgrowing Oradell Public School, but actually we have so much here that so many other schools don't have. So for example, as a former teacher, our occupational therapist has a classroom. How many schools have an OT with a classroom? Our instructional music program has a classroom. Our ESL teachers have a full classroom. We don't share spaces. So if suddenly we needed more classrooms, we have them.
right.
Right now, when we have resource room classes in special education, where in many districts it is common to put 2 classes in one room with a divider and the county comes in and they evaluate and you do a waiver, we have none of that. So we have room to grow if that was the case. But as I said, based on our incoming enrollment next year and even the inventory on sale in Oradell right now, we don't predict that. We actually anticipate a net change next year of probably minus 30 students across the district.
Okay. And classrooms, and that's wonderful that you do have classrooms available in case we need them. I think I'm just talking more about support and also, coming to an event like the sing-along and there only being standing room, not being afforded opportunities as parents to be able to volunteer because there's 700 people ahead of us. These are all situations I think that, need to be figured out. Safety and, that's a huge issue. Having an entire 2nd grade class walking around the school with 3 aides is unacceptable. That's a safety issue. So obviously there needs to be more support that goes into this planning. I think we have to stop pretending we're a small hometown school because we're not. We're a big town and we have a lot of students.
And we definitely hear that. We have 29 aides in the building right now. During that walk, there were actually and not that this makes it better, there were 5 adults.
Yeah. Well,
we can never have
Right.
enough, and we will
course.
continue to look
Yeah.
to hire lunch aides,
Yeah.
especially because that is a time when we know, the more the merrier.
Right.
You can imagine it's not a job people are
Of course.
looking for. So if
But
you know
then-
anyone,
yeah,
some
but
time
then
in the
we
middle
have
of the
to
day.
figure out a way to
Yes.
incentivize it and to get these people and to make sure that they're all trained, making sure that our substitutes have appropriate training. I know everybody complains about training days. I say take them, have them. Let them be. I'll keep kids home for a day to have a training. But I guess that kind of goes into my second question in regards to support for all students. And yes, Oradell has some amazing programs for children at risk, special ed, 504. But I have to disagree. I've worked in many public schools, and they have a lot more than what we have to offer. Saying that one OT for 800 potential students, I don't know how Mrs. Miller stays here. I really don't. And with the amount of school anxiety, social skills, sensory disorders, and all of these other things that are popping up, whether they're due to COVID, whether they're due to the changes of the times and, internet, it's here. And we need to make sure that every single child is getting what they need. So I guess some of the things that I was able to identify, particularly was, having scientifically proven curriculum in the classroom. There are schools like Patterson, New Jersey, that does Wilson and Orton. That's their curriculum. We know that that is going to be an amazing way to teach all children, not necessarily children that are at risk, but that it's a great way to make sure that everybody's at the same playing field. Also, access to a reading specialist. I'm appalled that OPS does not have a specific position of reading specialist. I worked in a one school district as well, and they had 3. And it was not a well-off town. It wasn't anything crazy. It was a very small district too. Let's see. Also, teacher coaching. I was a teacher's coach for a little bit, and it was so helpful to our teachers because I would go in, I would help them modify lessons, I would help them with behavioral issues if there were anything kind of brewing before it got to the crisis level. I would help to support, different learning differences in the classroom, help the teachers to differentiate, and I really was just able to provide that support to them. I feel like that's something, especially with 26 children in a class, that would be appropriate to fix a situation like that. This way, a reading specialist can come in, maybe even do a lesson here and there. But it's really important, and it's an important thing right now, being that our reading levels, as a country, are suffering. My phone keeps.
Sure. I'm just going to
Sure, please.
comment a little bit on the reading specialist piece. We have 2 certified reading specialists in the building. I could take one of them and say, you are just the reading specialist. But right now, what if there's a period that I don't need a reading specialist? That's all they can do then. If I keep them as an intervention teacher, because both of them are interventionists in the building, then they can act as a reading specialist when needed, but they can also do math if needed. So that's why, it would be very easy for us to take one of them, as they both are certified, and say, you're the reading specialist.
Yeah.
But it also opens us up to not being able to use them if suddenly we have a cohort that needs more math support. So, it's really just a decision that we make of everybody wears many hats, and the more hats you can give a person, it's like why we love to hire general ed and special ed certified teachers, right? Because we want to be able to put them where we need them in that moment. That's the only reason. But we do have 2 certified reading specialists.
It's basically the legal issue with the title and what they can
and what
do.
you can do. You can't do math if you're reading.
But you're telling me that with 800 plus people that there would be a reading specialist that didn't have anything to do? I find that hard to believe.
It would depend on scheduling. Schedules are weird that way,
I think that that's kind of crazy to say because, with 800 plus children, and I know that we have a high incident rate of children doing RTI and things like that, or, at least those children who are now being pulled out for those services. And of course, we always fight for least restricted environment. So now my child who did poorly on the dibbles now is being pulled out. I don't care what time it is, she's being pulled out. And as a 3rd grader, she's self-conscious about that and is now doing worse because she's worried about being pulled out. When, children with IEPs, that's all we do is want to push them in, push them in, push them in, push them in. So maybe that reading specialist could now go in instead of having that RTI class and do in-class support and help the teacher modify the already reading lessons that they have, or supplement with a small group and doing one of those other scientifically proven curriculums. I think there's room
Sure.
for improvement.
And at our next admin meeting, one of the things that I will ask the admin team to bring to me is how many students we are providing intervention for reading, and how many students we are providing intervention for math. Because as a district, we know our language arts scores are much higher. So, and it may be grade specific. It may be that we have to look at having more of a reading support program in the primary grades and when we're getting to the upper grades.
Right.
And we're more than willing to look at that.
Right. How many classrooms have special ed teachers that push in for services?
I would have to get back to you on that. I can tell you if there are special education students, all our science and social studies classes are co-taught. But I don't know in every grade level how many reading and writing. Some grades have an in-class support class and a resource room cohort. Some may not. Some might only have an in-class. But I would be happy to get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Additional guidance counselors, I know that there are so much going on with our children in regards to anxiety. Both of my children have anxiety. They didn't get it from me. Guidance counselors, social workers, somebody to run social skills groups. Navigating the third grade girls situation is not easy. There should be a girls group. Why don't we have these options? It seems like we do have special ed social skills groups, and we have a bunch of children that are pulled into that to, help with that particular piece of, appropriate socialization and things like that. But I'm looking at greater level type.
We do have general ed social skills groups, and that third grade one actually is interesting as a former third grade teacher. So when something like that comes up and you think it would be a betterment of the school, reach out to Mrs. Brancato, because sometimes it's knowing hey, this is kind of bubbling up right now, because we do run social skills groups. And
Lunch bunch?
Yes,
Yeah.
lunch bunch.
Yeah, but again, I feel like the children who are targeted with that or the children who are included in some of those things are children that have had issues in the past. So, my daughter, who is a rule follower, doesn't necessarily want to go to lunch bunch with so-and-so and so-and-so who are known children for having issues.
But again, if you bring that to them, and you know both of them well enough, then we talk about outside the box and can we run a group after school? There's absolute things that we can do, but I will be honest, that one wasn't even on my radar. So it's a really good one.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you share that with them, trust me, they're going to run with it.
Okay. So modern technology, crisis management plan, again, all of these things are things that we need to have in place. And I just really want to know what are the steps that are being taken to improve these services and continue to keep up with some of the other districts. I came here 3 years ago. We moved here 3 years ago because of the amazing school system. When I got here, I was so pleasantly taken back by the educators. You guys have phenomenal educators that I believe carry the back of the school. The administration has been nothing but open to me, very, understanding to any of my children's needs, my needs. So I really do appreciate that. But when I look at this district, I don't necessarily look at it as an amazing school district. There are a lot of things that need to change, and I want to be able to have that all for my children.
Before I answer that, can I ask specifically what you're speaking about with regards to technology?
Just being able to have all the most up-to-date technology in the classrooms.
So every year we buy 250 Chromebooks. We have a state-of-the-art infrastructure. Every classroom doesn't just have Wi-Fi, but has digital access. I know you listen to board meetings, so you'll know that this year we also took on a study of different interactive panels. In fact, your child's classroom just got one installed today. Today's professional development was all based on technology. We have 5. I'm so proud of this, and that's why you're gonna have to listen to me a little bit.
That's okay. Boast.
We have I was in another school recently, and I am incredibly critical of Oradell Public School because, like you, I don't want to be the superintendent of a subpar school district, and I don't believe I am. But when people keep telling you you're subpar, you start to take that on. So I was in a school district last week, and I was walking through that school, and anybody who saw me afterwards heard me. I take for granted sometimes what we have because we're so used to seeing it. We have a STEM lab that has 5 3D printers, that has a laser cutter, that has hydroponics gardening, that has robotics programming, that has coding. Every grade here is doing something that I would say is cutting edge. Our 3rd graders right now are looking at the playground and creating 3D models of how else to make an inclusive playground. That's really cool stuff. And that's technology for creativity and creation. Now, when we talk about technology for differentiation, the district not only is, of course, one-to-one, we're one-to-one with a plan. Again, just talked to another superintendent today. He's like, I'm going to buy 700 Chromebooks. I said, why are you buying 700 Chromebooks? Oradell Public School has a plan. Every 1st grader gets a Chromebook. They keep it till 3rd grade. Every 4th grader gets a new Chromebook. It is in our budget. It happens every single year. In addition to those Chromebooks, because what's a Chromebook if you don't have a plan, right? We have over $42,000 worth of digital subscriptions to help teaching and learning. Again, I love to talk about Oradell Public School. If you ever have a question about something like that, ask. I mean, I will show you it.
I have a question. What do you want to see that you're not seeing in technology specifically?
Just making sure that all of the classrooms have these these tools, and that each child has access to those tools, and building confidence using those tools. I don't necessarily find time on a computer with IXL a wonderful learning tool. It's something that could help a child get better at what they've already learned, but just making sure that all of the children have exactly the most up-to-date technology tools. That's kind of where I'm going with that, especially the special ed population.
And the only thing I'll add on is, please know that we are also deliberate. There are districts that put kindergartners on Chromebooks, and we philosophically have some concerns with that. So you will see it, and your kids are kind of in those middle grades, right? You're going to see more and more as you go on, and some of that is very deliberate.
Yeah, I mean, last year I know my daughter was involved with a STEM project. They were supposed to be building, like, I guess a town or something like that, and I guess it failed very poorly, and my daughter was so upset about it. So we do appreciate those STEM nights, and I know my family loves those things. So, just making sure that everybody has access to those tools, and not having to beg for them. And then I guess my last question is about funding. I know there's a lot of talk about Murphy really kind of, cutting back some things. Hopefully we don't see anything until 2026. But, I just wanted to make sure that our state and school budgets are being utilized effectively. What kind of impact that will have on us, especially being, a Bergen County school district. Obviously, there's a need for, various improvements within OPS. But the district continues to report a budget surplus. So
What improvements are you mentioning when you say there's obvious improvements that need to be done?
The special education, the community, the communication, the everything that everybody is talking about, making Oradell the
I thought
best.
you meant building-wise. I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
Okay.
no. A bigger auditorium. I mean, you just redid this. Right.
I misunderstood you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Just making sure that those things like an extra reading specialist, having maybe a district behaviorist, having teacher coaches, making sure that those are all you're not able to utilize those things because you don't want to spend money on the budget and have a certain surplus. Listen, money's not my thing, I'll tell you right now. But I know that our children are worth every penny, and I pay a lot in taxes. I paid a lot for my home to come here so my children have the best education. And I just want to make sure that we're constantly on top of that. We're constantly looking how to better ourselves. I agree that we should praise what should be praised. And again, when I look at Oradell, I don't look at the bottom in any way, shape, or form. I look more towards the top, but there's still room for improvement. There will always be room for improvement. And I just want you to know that you have an amazing family and resident support. We want to make our children the best that they can be by supporting our admin, by supporting our educators. So, you know, just I want, as a board, to always keep that in mind, that we're looking to always improve.
So I just want to say something to that. I can assure you, and I said it in my in the last meeting, that this board is hypercritical. There they go, of everything. Almost too much, maybe. So I can tell you from a board level, we are always trying to improve things, but I will tell you this. You have probably the most caring superintendent and admin team in the county. They put in hours, and they are constantly thinking about your children and how to do better, how to do better, how to do better. So I will tell you that without you even coming up here and telling us all this, these things are in discussion weekly with our superintendent and admin. So I do want you to have the confidence that this is a constant conversation between admin, superintendent, the teachers at the grade level. But you really have one of the most hardworking
I can well
groups
attest to
of
that.
superintendent and admin anywhere.
I
And
have
how
had
much they
admin
care for
call
your
me at
children
5
is
o'clock. Yes.
unbelievable,
I
I
can
will tell
attest
you.
to that. I can totally attest to
So
that.
never worry about
I've
that.
had admin call me at 5 o'clock in the evening, and
Yeah.
I'm like, go home. So, but you know, I just want, as a parent, to tell you what I see and that what I wish for. So this is my wish list.
No, we
for
appreciate you
OPS.
coming. This is what this is for. So thank you for
Thank
coming.
Thanks.
Hi there. Okay, my name is Danielle Viguero. I'm at 139 Gordon Court. Sorry, is this better? Oh, tall. Okay, I'll hold on to it. I did email this one over, but just thought better to get it on the radar here. And this kind of goes hand in hand with some of the safety that we've been talking about, and also, of course, for budget. The topic of
Do you have a different last name on your email?
Maffeo.
Okay,
Sorry.
I have it with me.
My
in case-
professional
yes.
and my kids.
I have it with me.
Yes.
Okay.
Basically, the topic of a school resource officer. So I think I have a kindergartner, so I apologize if I don't know all the background here, but it does seem like there is a little bit of ambiguity when bringing this topic up on whether this is something that would be kind of like a board decision or principal, superintendent decision. Is it something that you would look to the parents to say, is this, you know, where you would like your tax dollars to go to and support? I know typically and statistically speaking, my husband is in law enforcement, I'm in finance, so I get the battle here. But yes, when we think about a grade school, acts of violence is statistically lower, but I think even listening to some of the arguments made at the last meeting, just around school safety, bullying in general, that presence from a law enforcement professional really does kind of help foster a positive relationship among students, teachers, and just that overall sense of safety. I know there's been a few of the arguments that point to the live cameras or proximity to Oradell police, which is great, but I hate it to be like a false sense of hope, especially with younger kids who would be the ones that do need that guidance in a time of, a bullying, an incident, a fight that were to break out.
It's definitely a topic that's been discussed. It would have to be board approved. Many pros, many cons, heavy financial implications, but do you want to speak on this, Ms. Bozios, a little bit?
And also really understanding what like a class 3 can and cannot do. So they can be that buddy in the hallway. Like, I always say one of the reasons I support the LEAD program is there's actually a lot of research that it actually stops drug usage later, but it gives our students a face with the police department. And for that, I value the program so much. But when it comes to an actual bullying investigation or a fight, they actually can't talk to kids. Yeah. So that, it's kind of saying, if that's what we want, then a class 3 is not the right choice. and to look at something else. But as President Nichols said, it is something that we continue
Yeah, I think
to
that
talk
presence
about.
is definitely something that it could be beneficial. I know, I think surrounding schools have it as well, so it would be nice to know that we fall into that camp.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Oh, dear God, no.
Hi, Kelly Lavecchia from First Street. I originally wasn't planning on speaking, so I don't have any fancy speech or anything planned, just warning you. But I have some follow-up questions. I think way back to the beginning of the meeting, we were talking about safety. And I just as a parent want to understand what you're talking about when you mean the red, yellow, green system. And is that specifically for communication that you give to the community as a whole?
Okay, so when the two parents came to the board meeting and started talking about crisis communication, one of the things they followed up with is they gave me some guiding documents from some other districts. So the first thing we realized is we have all of those things. We've just never shared them with you because we've always seen them as internal documents. And some of those documents have to stay internal, right? But one of the pieces that I did see as something that was missing was a communication guide. So when an incident happens, if it's in the green level, this is how we're going to communicate to the community. This is when we're going to communicate to the community. If it's in the yellow level, these are yellow type incidents at Oradell Public School. This is how we're going to deal with them. This is how we're going to communicate. Does that answer?
Yes.
Perfect.
So then my follow-up question is regarding this idea of incident reports and like how you're using data, right? So like if I'm going to make something up hypothetical, examples help me like learn and understand better. So let's say my child, someone calls them a name, right? A pretty bad name. How is that communicated to me as a parent? Are you keeping an incident report? Can I receive a copy of the incident report? Like, I don't think that's clear to parents either. I discussed it with my sister. I'm not an educator, but like all my family is. I'm one of those. And she's been an educator for over 20 years in 3 different school districts. And she was like, yeah, there's always an incident report. If something happens to your child, you get a copy, you and the school discuss it. And then we even keep data because if there's repeat offenders, we're able to like identify weak spots of like where we need to adjust. So I don't know what's happening with like into regards as to how we handle that. So I just wanted to follow up.
So we keep track, and so our assistant principals keep, infraction logs, and we inform the parent, but there isn't a form. So that could be something then that we say with this communication, this is a yellow incident, and one of our internal factors is we're going to communicate using this incident log.
Okay.
So, I mean, all of these, and again, as President Nichols said, like, we're always driven to get better. And sometimes when things have been happening a certain way, you just keep doing it. And it sounds really weird. I'm really excited to create this because I think what happens is it's a clear document between us and our parent community and our board, and we need that because right now what's happening is we just interpret things differently. And this will hopefully clarify all that.
Sure. And then I guess my last question is, then how are the kids supported? So say my kid is the one who said a bad word. What are you all doing to support them so that they, obviously I'll talk to them at home. Once again, this is a hypothetical. But like, it was mentioned earlier that sometimes there's like individual support for the students. Do we have a system like that in place as well?
Yes, any alleged perpetrator, alleged victim of any incident gets offered counseling to their parent. And also, I mean, most of our code of conduct, what does it talk about? It talks about detention, but it also talks about reflection. So what that reflection is kind of a time for the assistant principal or the counselor deciding who, depending on who we assign it to sit and talk about the event from the perpetrator perspective also.
And are we keeping track of how many incidences are occurring so that we know
Yes.
that we have to have an appropriate amount of guidance counselors?
We do
and
keep track
all
of the
that?
amount of
So the one guidance
incidents.
counselor right now is able to handle all
Well,
of that
we
counseling?
We have more than one guidance counselor.
The one full-time and
One
part-time?
part-time. So, I mean, listen, there could always be more, right? But we have doubled that number
Yeah.
since
That's what I'm just asking
2019,
if there's
20.
data, because the
Yeah.
numbers can always tell you if it's
You know what?
enough.
I will ask our assistant principals to share their logs with me so I can do a more thorough analysis.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you for coming. We're boring people, they're all leaving.
How are you? Amanda Harrison, 479 Lakeview. I just have a follow-up question with the red light, green light. So you're going to put a procedure. Are we, the community, allowed to vote what we think is red, yellow, and green?
We're going to have a presentation. It's going to go through the board first, PR. It's going to be all put together. Then we'll have Ms. Bozios do a presentation at one of our board meetings, where afterwards you can comment, make suggestions.
So then our suggestions
Yeah.
will then be counted for, and, okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
definitely.
Okay.
There will be things, though, that parents may suggest that the
Are
admin
not
doesn't agree with.
realistic.
So like, it
Yes.
gets a little bit tricky, because then people say, well, you asked my opinion, we didn't take it, but, we have two ends of the spectrum. We have some parents that want to know everything, and then we have some that say, don't bother me at all, and then we have to really focus on what do we want our admins to be spending their time on every day.
Yeah.
And some things are just going to happen in an elementary school that they don't think rises to the level. So it'll be a balancing act, but there will be a public presentation on it, and you will be able to comment or
Perfect.
ask questions or whatever you want.
Wonderful, thank you. And now, one of the earlier parents said, Ms. Bozios, you mentioned that there's protocol and that the staff follows the protocol. My question is, and I know it's difficult because we manage a lot of students throughout the day, and, we try to stick to protocol. If a staff member, kind of has an overwhelming day and is also stressed and sometimes, misses protocol for whatever reason, for whatever the situation is, how is that handled by the administration? I'm sorry.
It's okay. There are some things we don't mess with.
Right.
And safety, like if there was a risk that was missed, frankly, we've taken disciplinary action.
Okay.
I hate to say it, I don't want to sound harsh, but there's certain things, it doesn't matter if you had a tough day.
Right.
We've had staff members who forgot and came back at 3:05, and even then, when we've had to then put this crisis protocol, and if you've worked in a school, trying to put something in place when kids are already at home is even harder. We've kind of said, our crisis protocol, the way it's written, it for danger to self or others, actually even goes as far as to say, you heard it, someone told you it. And the first thing is, you stop what you're doing, and you get an administrator.
Got it.
So there's just, there's no excuses for that.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me go through my emails, because some people had emailed me questions, so I wanted to get to them. So Danielle's was one. There's one on communication. Ms. Stinberg I have. Okay, so this was something that was kind of brought up before our last meeting about our buildings and grounds policy, and this is a legal question. So one of the questions that two of our parents had, I guess there was confusion on our board policy, was why was the board voting on, things during the day? People thought we could only vote on use of our school facilities after school, so that was the one question. And then in our policy, it states, let me read this. We can refuse grant use of the building whenever in the board's judgment there's good reason. So they were wondering what good reason is. So I guess the questions were, does the board have the authority to vote on outside groups using the building during the day? And what would be, our judgment on good reason? That's in the policy.
Well, I think the policy says that, first of all, it's always board authority or board discretion as to use of the facilities by outside groups, whether it's during the day or if it's after the day. There's a presumption that during the day it's going to be scrutinized. We really want this for instructional use. However, on a case-by-case basis, there might be exceptions. And I think the case-by-case example or that language is to give it broad enough where the board can look at certain things and certain uses and certain proposals that come up on a case-by-case basis to make those exceptions. But I think the priority and what the intent of the policy is instruction first during the day, fun things outside of the day. So that's, if I answer that question, that's what the intent
And that
is.
would be like good reason or whatever. And then there's another part of it, which I think I can answer, but one was that, this is from the email. The understanding is if school property is open to one group, all of the groups must be granted access. And they were saying that if one author was granted permission to use the facilities, and all others must be granted. So just to clarify that, the authors were not, asking for access to our building. It was the PTA. So never was one author, pulled here, that it was just the PTA. So also, that is not true that just because we grant the PTA access to our building, that we have to grant all other groups. There are different columns of groups on our building use. You can go.
There's different classes of users. So instructional users come first. So anything related directly with the kids comes first. And I think that's what the intent is. So there's other groups that may want to use a room, whether it's Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. It's not necessarily considered instructional, even though it directly impacts the kids, but that's considered like a second group of users. And there's some clarifications. It might be only after school. It's not during the instructional day. But those are the type of different categories of different users.
We have for-profit categories, all kinds. And if there's ever a question, we just, the board office calls the attorney. But I just wanted to get through those because they were emailed to us. Any other questions? Does any board member want to make a comment about anything?
I do.
Mr. Darian?
Yeah. So you had mentioned that a lot of times we address issues at a subcommittee level, and that is absolutely true. A lot of things start at the subcommittee and work its way up onto the agenda. The reason why we don't talk about them in public is probably two main reasons. One is we're a relatively small school, a relatively small board. This meeting is held in public, so everyone has a chance to see it, but it's really our meeting where we just sit down and we go through the mundane work of approving things. We have our meeting every 2 weeks because the administration needs to cut checks more than once a month, and they can't cut checks until they get board approval. So in a lot of ways, these meetings are just board members amongst themselves just going through and approving agenda items. We don't sit here and have lengthy discussions among ourselves over things we've already discussed for the purpose of the community, because a lot of times nobody really is interested. So that's one of the reasons why we don't usually spend 10 or 15 minutes discussing things. Now, we do have questions a lot about things that are going on at the school, and we do discuss them at subcommittees, but then generally we ask the superintendent to present to the board. So when it comes to, grades or other things or our goals, we develop goals annually. We ask the superintendent to present, and that's where a lot of what we feel is important gets shared with the community. The other thing is sometimes when we're discussing things, it's not really confidential, like, obviously with personnel-related issues, but it does involve other groups, and when there's two sides of a coin, sometimes you just don't want to talk about that in public. Or if a group submitted an incomplete application, you don't want to call them out. So a lot of times we just don't talk about it. We just kind of, just say, hey, this is something we should maybe table, or we vote no and it gets pushed back, and what have you. But it really doesn't help to highlight all issues. So those are the two things that I don't think were clear, especially after the fiasco, not the last meeting, but 2 meetings ago. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Any other board members?
Mrs. Walker?
I think the one thing we didn't mention was that after each committee meeting, the board is, the entire board, so 3 of us meet, I'm chair of personnel. After my personnel meeting, notes were taken by Ms. Bozios, and those notes are title of what was discussed and an explanation of what we have discussed, so that the whole board then is privy to what we had been doing at our meeting. And if anyone has any questions, they'd reach out to either me, the chairman, or Ms. Bozios, so that it isn't just something the committee is privy to, but the entire board does get it. Or if something is listed on there that isn't quite explicit enough, the board has all the right to, well, we welcome it, to question it. So.
I have one
Mr.
more.
Darian?
Yeah, and I don't know if the community is aware, but we get the preliminary agenda for Wednesday's meetings on Friday. And I know that it's very difficult for the administration to put together because it's a lot of information. They got to get it way ahead of time. And usually when we get our final, it has red text, which means something happened between last Friday and today. But that gives us adequate time to make sure that we understand what's going on, and if we have any questions, we can reach out and get a clearer understanding so that when we make a decision, it's an informed decision.
And just wanted to let the community know, right, as a board, right, we all come from different industries, we all have different expertise, right? So we have, you know, CPAs on here, educators, right, technologists, right? So as you kind of look at, well, could we do better with technology, right? Could we do better with curriculum? Could we do better with the budget, right? You know, social emotional, right? We have guidance counselors on the board. So we all have, I would say, areas that we can, you know, contribute, and that we do contribute. We do have questions. I mean, we have parents on the board, right? So we're hyper aware of things, right? And we kind of, each of us bring a specialty to the table, right? And I think that's where we kind of come through together through committees and then voting on things and whatnot.
I meant to share this earlier, but since 2 weeks ago was such a big fiasco with the author's presentation, I did receive great feedback. I saw that we had a special guest on Wednesday with Mr. Chad Sell. Thank you for coming. And with that, I received a bunch of letters from the children, thank you cards for the PTA saying thank you very much for hosting such a lovely event. And I heard from Mr. Mangle, he said that this was the first year that he received a thank you from the children of all the author's presentations, which that was great. And I received a personal email from one of the teachers. It said, "Good evening, Mrs. Harrison. Our class and the entire 4th grade absolutely enjoyed every minute of the author's visits event. The kids were 100% engaged in Chad Sell's presentation from start to finish. Chad was so gracious to take the time to meet every child. They were really inspired by his illustration and were so excited to and proud to share their creative drawings with everyone. We want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and our class is sending thank you cards to you, the PTA, Mr. Mangle, and Chad Sell. We cannot express enough how grateful we are to have you as part of the amazing PTA who takes the time to set up such phenomenal events for our school. Thank you for your hard work you put together and create a memorable experience for the children. Thank you." I will be sending out the thank you cards to Mr. Sell this Friday, but yes, it was a lovely event for all 3 authors. All 3 authors were great, and the children were engaged from kindergarten through 6th grade, so it was a good turnout.
Great to hear.
Sorry, last one, I promise. Follow up on, and it's not a, Mr. Darian, I know more about buildings and grounds than anything else in this building because you actually give a full report of everything at your meeting. It's not an individual criticism of any board member, and I did vote for many of you sitting here because I do trust you. To me, it's a structures and systems issue. I don't understand why something isn't presented at a board meeting before it's voted on at a following board meeting where the public actually then can comment on it. I don't find any level of transparency and engagement when you've had the internal dialogue, you've shared your minutes with one another, and you vote. An agenda open to the public for agenda items only, I don't even know what you're talking about. When you're voting on these, you all have that information. So where is the level of engagement and transparency to the public? In the system I work in, where there are votes, a resolution has to be presented. It cannot be voted on at the same meeting. So anything, a committee meeting that's presented is presented at one meeting, discussion is had, the following meeting, it's open to the public can then comment on curriculum, the budget, personnel, whatever it might be, buildings and grounds, to hear the voice of the public before a board votes on it. Is there anything like that in a
I
New
think
Jersey
she's talking about
school
working
board?
session.
A work session. So some districts will have one regular meeting where they take action, one meeting where it's a work session.
So
It's
how
just
do we vote for
discussion.
that? So that the public can have a level of engagement. You say all the time you want people to come and engage, but then you sit here and tell us that you've already talked about it, so you don't need to spend hours here, and I appreciate that and respect that, I do. But then why would anyone come? You say they don't care, or they don't show up, or they don't get involved, they didn't come to strategic planning. Like, you've got to give the opportunity, and you're not, because it happens behind closed doors. And again, I trust that it is happening. I do trust that you're putting in the time and that the expertise is here. However, there's expertise out here too. And your kids are sitting here. Some of you don't have kids sitting here. We all have kids that are sitting here. So if you want the level of investment and commitment, we need to know what's going on. Again, not a book issue, a large issue. And to me, it's not people, it's systems and structures. I promise.
Anyone else before we move forward? Okay, so we're going to move to the superintendent's report. If you don't want to stay for this meeting, it's fine. Whatever you want to do, then Mr. Iapelli is going to do the presentation for, it's a tentative budget. It's just the presentation to the board. And then after that, I'm going to open up for agenda items only unless someone really needs to leave now and wants to comment on an agenda item. Okay, so we'll move forward to superintendent's report.
It feels weird to say good evening. I've been here for a while. So good evening. I'd like to begin by congratulating Ms. Sham and our Odyssey of the Mind team on placing first at the regional tournament. Their performance was phenomenal, and they placed first in both the spontaneous and the long-term portion of the competition. What's really impressive about that, and I know that some members of the board have heard this in the past, is that as a K-6 school, we often get pushed to have to compete in the middle school division. So our fifth graders, and I don't think we have a fourth grader on the team this year, are actually competing against sixth, seventh, and eighth graders. And if you know anything about education, there's a really big difference between a fifth grader and an eighth grader in terms of their presence, but they were rock stars in it. And, you know, I do invite the board, you know, we're very cautious about what we share publicly about Odyssey because there is a belief that other teams are watching our board meetings and might actually steal some of our props. So we don't share until after Worlds, but I do invite the board to stop downstairs because there are like automatons that were made that I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I'm a reading writing gal. I don't even understand how they work. But this fifth grader can explain it like it's amazing. So congratulations on the team, and we wish them luck in the state tournament in April. Today was a really exciting day at OPS as our teachers participated in professional development this afternoon focused on technology. Sessions included using AI as a tool for teaching, learning, and efficiency, formative as an assessment tool, Linkett's data manager platform, Canva, using interactive panels in the classroom, robotics, and both the Read Naturally and Bookshare platforms. And today was one of our combination assigned PD sessions and choice PD sessions, and that's really important to us. Every single person, just like students need differentiation, our staff need differentiation. So all staff went to an hour on AI because there's so much constantly changing. We felt all staff would benefit from that. The second session, staff actually chose what would help move their teaching and learning forward. And finally, we are in the middle of March into Reading. We have had some of our police department coming in. I know I have some board members coming to read, and the month will end with a camp-in this very auditorium with no food or drink. Yes, because I don't know how many times we can clean the rug. And no. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Iapelli, budget presentation.
Yes, thank you. For those of you who don't know, I'm also a resident of Oradell, and I've never met another business administrator who taught first grade, so I'm also a former teacher. So I do understand needs of the classroom. My job, I like to say, with this developing a budget is, for those who know the book, is not to make the mixed up chameleon. Try to keep the budget balanced, meeting the needs of the students, allocating scarce resources among limited revenues. So this is a tentative budget. This budget is still in flux. It's still being developed. This is just the state mandate to adopt a tentative budget that is submitted to the county executive. The budget can be worked on until our public hearing, which is going to be in May. So this is really just a look at the budget from a 50,000-foot level. It's not going to be extraordinarily detailed because this is where we're still at with the process. So the budget process starts, when I finish one budget, start one school year, we're already looking at the next one. So looking at revenues, you'll see the state, our revenues were cut from the state 3%. But 3% in Oradell doesn't mean much because it's only $31,000. We don't receive a lot of money from the state. So dialogue, principals, supervisors, finance committee, we meet many times. They delve into the budget in detail, asking very detailed questions. They are engaged. So we have to have a balanced budget. Budget can't be out of balance. Simple. You will see in the revenues, most of our budget, like most of Northern Bergen County, is levy-based. It's the tax levy, and it's going to be our revenues that are from various reserve accounts. I just want to address this idea that we have this surplus. By statute, the board has to have a 2% adjusted surplus from our 23-24 general fund expenditures. So we do have a $289,180, which you would call a surplus. That money cannot be used without the express permission from the Commissioner of Education. So there are funds that the board, even if they wanted to use them, cannot use them. That's by statute, it's 2%. I just wanted to bring that up because I heard we have a surplus, and there is a surplus, but it's a surplus that can't be used without permission. These are our tentative revenues. So right there you see our levy of $14,233,670. That may change, may not change, depending on, we have still some decisions that need to be made. We have unrestricted miscellaneous revenues that we receive, our state aid, as I said, is down about $31,000. And then you will see these other funds. So this is when you say, what does the district do? If we don't spend all the money at the end of the year, it goes into the various funds to be used for future years. So we have a budgeted fund balance of $200,000. That's to use to help reduce tax levy. If we didn't have that $200,000 there from the budget, the money would have to come from somewhere. It's either going to have to increase the levy or you're going to have to reduce costs, expenses. Capital projects. That $500,000 is coming from our capital reserve fund, which at the end of the year, if money is available, the board chooses to deposit money into those funds to fund future projects. Same thing with the maintenance reserve. Maintenance reserve, by statute, we could only hold $643,517. So it's not that we can have a maintenance reserve that is millions of dollars. All these funds are limited in what the board can have. But it's prudent on the board's behalf at the end of the year to put funds away for future use. And these are our tentative appropriations. The appropriations will meet the revenues, they equal. You will see total capital outlay. So in this budget as of now, there's a $500,000 capital outlay to put rooftop units on different parts of the OPS building. We are also exploring, though, grants from the state regarding from PSE&G direct install programs, so maybe we can get more units on the roof and also get some of that funded via PSE&G's direct install program. But that's something that's just come out, and we won't have numbers until May. The state doesn't give us our revenue numbers to the end of February, so we don't get some of these numbers until right when they're saying, the budget's due. We also have costs special education costs, and out-of-district placement is $90,000 tuition, a one-on-one aid is $65,000, transportation's $40,000. That's one student. What if we get 3 of those students next year and they're not in the budget? What does the board do? So you have to start trying to anticipate who could be coming into the district and having conversations about that. Just a pie chart to see where our money, this is all aggregated, just try to, what are our top cost centers? And the tentative budget resolution, as you can see, we only receive for this budget $231,000 in revenue. That's revenue from the state and the federal government. That's all that's anticipated as of now. We may get additional grants. Those are grants. We may get additional funds. We may not. But that's what we think is a conservative number to help balance the budget. So well over, if you think about it, you add the reserves, you add the levy, well over 90% of the budget is locally funded. And there is no extra money coming from the state. We are considered to be, whether people believe it or not, a very wealthy district. Free and reduced lunch drives how much money you receive from the state, from the federal government. If you don't have high free and reduced lunch students, you don't receive money. So our money will always just be based on formulaic principles that the state decides. Next step, we're going to adopt this budget. Hopefully the board does. Then we will, after the county executive can now hold that budget to review until April 21st. Then the board has to publicly advertise that we're going to hold the public hearing. Ours is tentatively set, it looks like for May 7th. And that's when the final budget will be actually delivered, and you'll be able to see it in more detail. Here, we're still at like the 50,000 foot level, getting a general idea, meeting the state mandate to submitting a budget. But is this the final budget? Is this the budget that we're going to use for 25, 26? Not necessarily. And that concludes my budget presentation.
Mr. Iapelli, do you want to talk a little bit, when we were speaking today, about how, Ms. Bozios, I know, has part in this also, how you have to show how your budget supports
Yes.
state standards, and they will not approve your budget if you can't prove that you're supporting state standards, et cetera?
Yeah, this was one of the big learning lessons for me as superintendent. I always just thought that this big Excel document went to the county and that was what was submitted for the budget. But there's actually a narrative that has to be included. I do it in conjunction with the director of curriculum. So for example, next year's budget must include details on how we are meeting the new math standards. So we actually began our transition in math resource and math standards this past year, but students in grades K through 3 will have a new math resource next year. So that is a part of our budget that will also meet this state mandate. There are other areas, like for example, lots of districts try to get away with not having a library media specialist, which is actually a mandate that every district has one, and we have to show that in the budget. So there are certain things that we have to show curricularly, and also it will ask us, what are some of your district goals? It will ask us to reflect on this past year, and how did we use this past year's data to inform the future?
And I'll apologize too if I go a little too fast, because I live with these numbers every day, this budget every day, all day. So sometimes in my head, I've already think, oh, I've spoken about that, or we're ahead, and not realizing, well, some people may have no idea what I'm talking about. So I have no problems. If you have questions, feel free, ask them, because I may have just glossed over something that you felt was very important, but in my head, I've talked about it many times already.
I'm going to open to the board for the budget. I'm going to open to the board when it's open to the public for agenda items, but we've heard you speak enough about it, okay? Finance is good. I do want to make a comment. I know there's been a lot online about the new assessed values on homes in Oradell. And you have to remember, everybody sitting up here, all the board members, we're in your same exact position. We opened it and, dropped dead, came back. But I just want to remind everyone that it all goes by on town factor. So let's say your assessed value went up 25%. Our budget is our budget. We have restrictions on how high we can go. So just because they're raising your tax value 25%, we can only go up 2% plus a few other things. Like the budgets are set. The budgets are just going to be, divided over a new tax base. You could have an issue, obviously, if you are way above the average, and you may have a good side if you're below. But same with the town, they have to stay within certain restricted guidelines. So our budgets are the budget. So just because if you went up 25%, our budget's not going up 25%. So everyone should realize that.
And I just wanted to make another comment on the valuation. The greater the homes are valued, as those increase, as the incomes of community members increase, if enrollment doesn't increase, that will eventually impact state aid. We'll actually get less money because the state sees it as you're wealthier this year than you were the prior year, so therefore you should be paying more. So increased home values, those are now factors in determining state aid. The income piece of it now has really become a large part of this, identifying who gets state aid and who doesn't. So as our values increase in town, as incomes increase, and if we don't have a lot of enrollment changes, I'd say in the future, money will be going from state aid, will be dropping, and we'll be asking for the board, will be asking for taxpayers to either decide to increase levy within caps. So you're trying to figure out, the state said this year, well, you can increase your budget, but we're expecting health benefits to go up 14%. We're expecting electricity to go up 15%. There's numbers to balance here. How do you figure that out? Well, they said you get 2% and a little bit. 85% of this budget is salaries and benefits. It's people and their benefits. There's really nothing that you could say tangible, we don't have a fleet of vehicles. We don't have, high operating overhead. Our attorney fees are below 130%. And we were talking about, I budgeted this year, and it's pretty consistent. We're looking at $50,000 to $57,000 a year within the budget of how many millions? So it's not an exorbitant amount of money. It's the money that's prudently needed to meet the needs of those potential litigation, questions that need to be answered, advice that needs to be prepared.
When we left the finance meeting last week, I think we were about $800,000 out of balance with things we need here. So it took a week. Mr. Iapelli brought it down. We're going to be looking at it again, but we are tight. And I know there was things mentioned about surplus at year end, but most of that surplus, I won't say most, I said a lot of it, we always budget special ed. We don't know if kids are going to be coming in, going out of district. So we always have one or two placeholders. If they come, we really don't have budget, but at year end with that budget, that's not money that we can say, hey, we had $100,000 left over, let's hire, I don't know, I'm going to make something, another teacher or whatever. We can't, because we may not have that next year. That is just sheer luck that someone didn't come in the district and have to get bussed out. So we use it a lot of times for technology. We buy our laptops with it. We always meet January, February to see how we're running, and we start getting a list together. I know they go to the staff, and what are things that we can buy this year that we didn't have to spend from our budget, as opposed to putting it in next year's budget so we can pull it forward and get it done. I probably shouldn't say this next part, but I'm going to. Since we're all taxpayers here, the one area I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I have this understanding wrong, but like I said, Oradell's budget is their budget. We can only go up a certain amount. The town's budget, Riverdale's budget can only go up a certain amount. Where I think the concern is, I think with towns, is with Riverdale. Because they spread it over, no, I'm just saying, they spread it over the combined, I think, assessed base of both towns. So if one town is much higher assessed than the other, it's a problem. Now, I do think Rivers has been keeping up, but that is somewhere maybe we could have an issue. I probably shouldn't be talking about this, but it's true. We're all taxpayers. So that's where we could have an issue. If one town doesn't, is that the truth? Is that how it goes? It gets spread over the thing. So if one town continuously ups their, assessed values and another one doesn't, that's where we're going to see a difference. And some years they go higher and it helps us, but that's where the issue could be. Do any board members have a question on the budget? I mean, this is just the tentative. We're going to be making changes. Mr. Darian?
Yeah, I have a comment first. Mr. Iapelli, that was the best presentation I've seen in 14 years. So, in terms of the budget, you really hit the nail on the head and you hit all the key points. So I'd like to thank you for that. The other thing is in terms of the assessments that have been sending out. I view it as the tide is rising and the tide rises all boats equally. What you have to worry about is if your assessment is more than other people in the community, because the way that the tax is sent to you, there's a total which includes the municipality and the two districts, school districts, and there's a total number. And they take that number and they divide it between the businesses and the residents. And unfortunately, we're losing some businesses, so more goes towards the residents this year versus prior years. And then it goes to your individual taxpayer based on percent of total. So if your percent of total is the same as it was last year because everyone else raised equally, the percent of total is the same. So you'll get basically whatever the percent of total is of that number, that's what you'll get. So it's not necessarily tied to the valuation. The reason why they adjust valuations is because of the exceptions. People will file a lawsuit against the municipality and they'll say, oh, this is wrong, this is way off, it's not calculated correctly. And then they go in front of a judge and they get a waiver, a tax waiver. And the municipality can't fight all those, so they end up getting huge shortfalls at the end of the year and it's unanticipated because they don't know who's going to fight against these appraisals. And so what they do is they do it every year. And then when it goes in front of a judge, the judge says, well, it was just recently appraised. Why is this wrong? And now, all of a sudden, the argument has changed, and most of them don't go through. So that's the reason why we get these repeated annual appraisals. But at the end of the day, it's the same. The percent to total is what matters. So it's like rising of all boats. And I think the other part, which is depressing, is that inflation, our money isn't going as far. So now you have to pay more for the same thing. So, you know, some of it is just inflation.
And also you have to realize we have a 2% cap plus a few other things, right? So when salaries go up more than 2%, you heard our benefits are budgeted at 14%. Well, the 14% on that almost $3 million, other than 2%, it has to come off of something else. So 85% of our budget is going up way more than 2%, our heat and everything. So there's very little wiggle room to really, I know people think like, you know, hiding money. We're not hiding money. We're trying to get through with the best education we can on the money we have.
I just wanted to clarify that one. Well, if the anticipated students do not arrive, we make purchases that instead of using for the next school year, we will make that purchase in the current school year and use it within. So if we anticipate that maybe a student will not arrive for this 24-25, we will, instead of spending that money next year, we will absorb it and use those funds and buy materials that we can use this year. So it's not that we're buying ahead necessarily, we're buying it and then implementing it within this budget, reallocating the funds instead of towards maybe tuitions, we reallocate it towards technology, and we could buy additional BenQ boards and have them in the building now as opposed to maybe waiting. So I just wanted to clarify that money isn't used in advance for the other year. It doesn't like we don't buy them and they just sit here.
Correct.
We're buying them and using them in the current school year.
Right, that's true. I should not have said that. We are doing things, yeah. But if we are doing things that we need in this year's school year, but we're buying an extra, but now we're going to use them in this school year. Correct. So any other questions from the board? Mrs. Walker?
Mr. Iapelli, you said that we are considered an affluent school district. Then how many students do not get subsidized lunch?
I don't know of any free or reduced, but if I look at it, what the state put in our budget, we did the semi-waiver. So Medicaid waiver, we were asking, well, how much money would that Medicaid waiver be? The state said there may be possibly 8 students out there. And those 8 students, if we were to use that money, was $798. So we are well below any number. We would need 20, 40% of our students before we would see real increases in aid. So that semi-waiver, because to get that $798, we'd spend $5,000 at a minimum just to get that. So that's the state assumption. And if anyone wants to meet to go over values, it goes out to the 10,000th place in the decimals. So, in calculating the rate, so if anybody wants to do the 10,000th place, an actual, I'll meet and show you that, how your tax rate is calculated.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you, Mr. Iapelli. Appreciate it. Okay, so we are now going to go back in our agenda where it says open to the public for agenda items. So this is where you can comment on anything that we're going to vote on, and one of them is the budget. So if you do have questions, you can comment. So, and then just to go back to what we're saying, at the end, we always have an open to the public for anything you want to talk about.
Make sure I find the pen. Hi, my name is Kate Boschert. I live at 469 Hasbrook Boulevard. Can everyone hear me in the back? Okay, that is always a challenge with this microphone. So my questions are specific to the budget, and I'm glad that some of our board members already raised them. One of them was going to be what percentage of our students are free and reduced price lunch. Before I get into my questions, though, I do want to thank you all for your service and for your dedication to the public school that we have in our town. And I apologize if my comments come across as short. I am an administrator, so I get straight to the point and I appreciate details.
We appreciate
and
that.
data. So my questions specifically about the budget come down to
Can you direct to me, and then I'll open it to whoever else?
Sure,
Okay.
sure. My questions specific to the budget are, what portion do we, and if we know this, we may or may not, since our budget has not been finalized, of our income from the state is federal flow-through money? So what portion of that funding is perhaps going to be impacted by changes at the federal level?
Mr. Iapelli, do you know that?
I have budgeted $230,000.
Okay, from the state, but what?
Well, that's including the IDEA flow-through.
Okay, and what portion of that? I'm not.
We're talking $170,000.
Okay.
Out of the entire budget. So if that was, and that's, I used 75% of what we received previously.
Okay. Reasonable.
Reasonable. And,
Right.
and the county won't let you, say, go even lower.
Okay. And you mentioned also seeking grants to support or to backfill some of the income. And I'm curious about what the source of those grants would be, potentially.
Well, the one we're pursuing now is called, it's through PSE&G. It's called
Okay.
Direct Install Program. They will fund, we don't know how much, they say up to 80%, but we don't know if that's 80% of 1 unit, 7 units. So we're in the early stages. The program just came out, but we have already had our audits done and our units inspected. So the more money that we could get from PSE&G is the less money that we would use from capital reserve. We're budgeting $500,000, but hopefully we get funds from PSE&G, and then that would reduce that amount. But again, all grants are tied, not all, I'll say 99% of grants are tied to free and reduced lunch. So without free and reduced lunch, you may read something that says, there's this grant opportunity.
No, I know we don't qualify.
Yeah, so just so that, yeah.
I'm an administrator in
okay.
grants
Okay.
at an
Yeah.
institution of higher education.
So you know.
Talking about people in the audience who have expertise that overlaps, I just want to.
I just want to piggyback on what Mr. Iapelli said. So if you've been listening or watching any of our prior board meetings, you've been hearing Mr. Darian, who was chair of Building Ground for a year now. We've been talking about HVAC units on the roof, and I think we have 7. So one is in very bad condition, and we're trying to put together a plan because they're not cheap. So every year when you see that we have a little bit of surplus left, we use part of it to buy things for the school, but then part of it every year we do have to put away, because if we don't have this money,
The roof goes, we're screwed.
we're done. Like one day, I don't know how many years ago, we came in and the parking lot, there was a pipe burst underneath and we had to rip up the parking lot. So every year we're doing that. But back to the grant that Mr. Iapelli was saying, I just want to say something about Mr. Iapelli. We were the first in the state to learn about the grant because of Mr. Iapelli, and the first to apply. So thank you, Mr. Iapelli, that we were the first ones. People didn't even know about it. So we've already had them here. They've done their audit. We're waiting for the thing. So again, though, it's based on our demographics. So we're waiting to see what happens. So keep going, sorry.
So my other question, since we're talking about costs rising and cost of living rising and our health insurance, which all of our cost of health insurance is increasing over time, increasing potentially 14%, and the cost of fuel and energy rising as well. I'd like to, and I'm hoping that as we go through the details of the budget over the next coming months, you will also be addressing how the board is taking some of those capital reserves and looking at future-proofing our school in terms of improving efficiency, improving, ways that we can reduce energy and things of that
We've
nature.
already done that. We did a huge ESIP, how many years ago with the state? We've already done it.
2017.
Before then, I think.
No, it was finished in 2017.
So if it was 2017, that's 8 years ago.
Yeah, but
Yes.
we have all new univents for all the classrooms. We have LED lights throughout the building. We, oh boy, we
Come
put
on
in,
and off
But
automatically.
we don't have solar panels on the roof.
We do
We
have solar
we do?
panels.
Okay.
We have variable speed pumps for our boilers. We have brand new transformers throughout the entire building.
So what additional steps are we looking at to future-proof?
Well, one
Is
of the
what-
things is tonight we have on our agenda the replacement of our Oradell units. Those are isolated. They're not connected to the rest of the building. Each classroom has a separate device. Those unfortunately are made in the UK, and so it took a little while for us to get those lined up in terms of the funds and to get to those, but those are the last of the units. You know, there really isn't, you know, the silver bullet anymore, unfortunately, when it comes to, you know, reducing our utilities or, green initiatives. You know, I mean, we're all ears. So, I mean, we kicked around the idea of maybe expanding our solar panels to have more. But, you know, there's really not a lot of money for that right now. And the SRECs that we get are not all that beneficial. So it would be basically, we'd be doing it, spending a lot of money, and then the outlay, the return on investment would be very long. And that's not something we want to, you know, we have other pressing issues right now, like what we're taking care of. So,
Well, even our HVAC units going in is going to be much more efficient than the ones that were put in 18 years ago.
right.
But I will tell you, when we did the ESIP, you had to go through the state, and they came to audit. And the way it worked was that they gave you a certain amount of money. We did this without going to the taxpayers with a referendum for more money. We did $2.4 million in this, and we never asked the taxpayers for another dime. What we did was, to the state, it was that our energy savings from becoming so energy efficient was paying for our loan from the state, which is still being paid. So we did go through that, and but they're, like I said, like the HVACs now are getting old. They will be much more efficient, but we had the state in, we did it.
And just one other thing, you know, the school operates weekends, you know, think about the gym, the auditorium, the school is used. So the utilities, I mean, you know, even though students aren't here, you know, we could charge and we try to get that money back. But then again, you know, if basketball is using that, I mean, the rec, it's just another, that's taxpayer money too, right? So it's this balance of keep the building open, have the building utilized by the community, but that comes with additional costs. And for instance, even our boilers are new, I mean, compared to boilers. I mean, boilers will last 50 years. So to take the boilers that we had that are 12 years old or 13 years old, and you want to replace those for more energy efficient, well, that's an 80-year payback. So we have, as far as we could go, the big ticket items have really been addressed.
We have a co-generator, which takes energy from the boilers and preheats water, you know, in addition to our generator backup. So there's a lot of things that we have. Like I said, you know,
Yeah. We have a
we're
lot of things.
pressed for.
I'm asking these
Yeah.
questions in the name of transparency, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really appreciate the answers from
No, we're glad you're asking.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. We're boring more people. Any other questions on anything on the agenda or the budget?
I'm signed in already, right? Just a quick question. I know until this past year, looking at the calendar, it's a calendar question. Until the past year, there was a February break. This year, there were 2 days off for February. I see in the draft calendar that we're down to 1. I was just curious if that was what the rationale was behind
We
that.
love our February break, but I'm going to let Ms. Bozios talk about this because we do have issues this year with the calendar.
When we put together the calendar, there's a couple of factors that kind of lead the way. One of them is we do have parents that have children both at Oradell Public School and Riverdale. And if we had a full week in February, what we would have had to do is extend school 1 more week. That would have meant that we had off, which most of us would have been very happy about, but Riverdale only has 1 day off. And then we would have finished a whole week after them. Now, you'll see a big push across schools to end school a little bit earlier in June. The truth is, operationally for us, it allows us to start our explorations at our extended school year program sooner, which gets everyone out of the building for us to do the true cleaning and maintenance work over the summer. So whenever we can have a February break, we put it in the calendar because we do believe that it gets everyone healthy and happy, but we just couldn't do it this year.
We also did talk at the committee level about actually bringing the teachers in before Labor Day in August. You know, we'd have to talk to them about it, which would maybe have given us a day at February, but this year we have other issues. One of the reasons we need to get done earlier is because we need to get explorations done because we have this huge Airedale project coming, I think $800,000. We're going to have cranes here, I believe, all kinds of things. So we need to get that done before school starts. So we couldn't really we didn't want to bring the teachers in August because if we're not done, you know, we don't know. So yeah, the calendar is always a discussion, but we love our February break. Anyone else? Okay, not seeing any. We are going to move. We're going to fly through. We're going to move to minutes. We have a review of February 26th. If there's any questions or comments from the board, please email Mr. Iapelli or myself. We have approval of February 12th. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion.
Second.
Second by Mr. Durian. Any questions or comments? Call the question.
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Nutland.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
I abstain.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Moving to committee reports. Mrs. Norian, would you take administrative?
Certainly. Under administrative, I'd like to present items A1, A2, and A3.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Walker. Any questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Nutland.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Buildings and grounds, Mr. Del Greco.
Thank you. I'd like to bring up items B1, I guess just building facilities use.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mr. Darian. Mrs. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Nutland.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Curriculum, Mrs. Norian.
Yes, we have not had our meeting, but we are looking forward to having a meeting next week. And we'll be double checking with our committee members to make certain that everyone's available for it. But I would like to present item C1, approval of a field trip, which is for Odyssey of the Mind.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Moran. Any questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Nutland.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Finance, Mr. Darian.
Yes. I'd like to first recognize the PTA for the mini grants that we have here tonight to approve. It's around $5,300 in total. We are very appreciative for that. And also, item D2, you know, this is taking money from our capital reserve, our maintenance reserve, you know, for those HVAC improvements. And Mr. Iapelli, can you just give us a, I know it's late, so I apologize to everyone, a little quick walkthrough on the enrollment adjustments for 383 and 209.
So the enrollment adjustment is based on a 5-year weighted average that the state gave us, and that enrollment adjustment means that you're not additional money, it means the tax levy could go up an additional $383,000 if the board sees fit. And the healthcare adjustment is pretty much that they know healthcare benefits are rising. So as of now, they said there's $209,000 that you can increase your levy by, but I need to supply documentation to see if we could actually get that adjustment. So right now, we are asking for these adjustments, but it's not guaranteed, and it only means that your levy can increase that much. There's no money tied to it from the state. It's just more money from Oradell taxpayers.
So if I could also add, so these numbers are, if we approve this agenda item, these numbers are the numbers that they can go to, not exceed that, but they could be less.
That is correct.
Okay,
Want to make your motion?
sorry. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to introduce items D1 and D2.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Nutland. Any questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Nutland.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Mr. Walsh is not here. Do you know if any meetings are coming, but, Mrs. Norian? I don't think so.
I haven't seen any, but that
Okay.
doesn't mean anything because I've been a little tied up with personal issues.
Mrs. Walker, personnel.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to present F1. I do have a question.
Let me
though.
get a second first. Do we have
I'll
a second?
second it.
Second by
I'm
Mrs.
sorry.
Norian. What's your question?
On B, one FB, the teacher, it's a field trip to the Hiram Blauvelt Art Museum. That's a new one on here. How does that have an extended day?
What number are you on?
I'm on B. Let's see, 5B. It's on the back side.
Oh, it's backwards. So let's go back to this. Let's stick with personnel first, and then we'll go backwards to curriculum. Is that okay? Or are you just asking about that? Oh, because how are we paying them extra? Oh, because it's leaving at 7:30 in the morning, I believe? No, go ahead.
So that is a field trip done for our art club students, so they go after school.
Oh, after school.
That's why we pay the teacher the contractual rate for a field trip outside the school day.
Okay, that wasn't, I didn't see that, so I'm thinking why a local museum would be extended.
Sorry, I misunderstood you. Sorry. Any other questions on personnel? I guess I'll ask my question that I ask every time since our attorney's here. Mr. Earl, did you go through the leave? Thank you. Any other questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Nutland.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Policy, Mr. Nutland?
Yes, we're working on getting everyone's schedule lined up for our next meeting.
Maybe next week, possibly.
Yeah.
Well, we may be doing curriculum, definitely in the next 2 weeks, I
Oh,
would
yeah,
say.
yeah.
Okay. Public relations, Ms. Downey isn't here. I know you were trying to get people together, so hopefully, again, in the next, because where are we with the website?
I was actually just looking at it.
It's nice.
Yeah.
You guys are going to like it.
And actually, I spoke to them, and the app is almost also done. So that, actually, if we do have a meeting next week, we should be able to review both.
Okay, great. That'd be better. Okay, if anyone has anything else to say about anything, it's open to the public. I give you credit for sitting through all of this. Any old or new business from the board?
Yeah, I have some
Hold
new
on,
business.
hold on.
I
Mrs.
have
Walker?
a little new business. The Oradell Emerson Rotary is presenting the Wizards along with the PTA.
So it got sold out very fast.
It got sold out in like 40 minutes or whatever. But we had a report this morning from the members who were involved in organizing it, and they said that the kids were fantastic. They had a preview by a couple of the members here in the school, and they said the kids were great. Everything looks really terrific. So
Good.
if you don't have a ticket, we're really sorry.
Mr. Darian?
Yes, so I'm laughing because our attorney's here and I'm going to say something that you probably want to say. Social media, Jeff. So I just wanted to say that, Facebook is, always been, and social media has always been a hot topic for board members. It's kind of like the third rail. When you say something, sometimes you have unintended consequences. But I was reaccepted to a private Facebook group that's pretty sizable here in the community. And And I just wanted to reemphasize that the point of participating on this Facebook group is just to help provide clarity and transferring information. And I'm, trying not to get drawn into any of the, discussions. And if someone starts bullying me, I'm going to, just withdraw comments. And it's unfortunate that sometimes this happens, but I think it's important because, it pains me to see how, people sometimes don't know what they're talking about and no one says anything, and it seems like, the phone tag, things start to blossom out of control, and you feel like, oh man, if I could only just say what I know, but, sometimes I can't because, it's confidential, but there are things that, that are pretty factual that if you just state it publicly, it would help. So I'm just stating this publicly now at this meeting, just to kind of, I'm playing with fire, and I'm reaching for that third rail, right, Jeff?
You are playing with fire. So to clarify, the board's means of communication is our meeting. This is how we communicate. If there's ever going to be an official statement from the board, it will always come from the board president, whoever that may be. I know there's a lot of groups going out there, whatnot. I used to be an Oradell resident. I never comment. If information is going to be put in a group like that, it's going to be information that is already public. There is no going to be ever, and Mr. Darian knows this, there's never going to be information that we're going to be able to share in one group that is not being shared with the entire community, because we cannot do that. So like our means of communication are these means. What did you want to comment on? Yeah, we are really not allowed to, even though it makes people crazy. Here, just turn that on.
I was going to say the same thing. So anything that you post has got to be already posted or already talked about in a public board meeting. So just be careful with that. And there's an exception. It's if you speak as a community member and you preface it and you have a disclaimer that you're speaking on behalf of yourself and your family and not on behalf of the Board of Education.
Yeah, I've already put the disclaimer out there, but that is true, and I'm glad you reemphasized that, and I will keep that in mind, and I'll keep my comments as brief as possible. Thank you.
Legally, we are not allowed to. There are a lot of guardrails placed on board members also. So we're really not allowed to talk as a group unless we are at the table, and we are like one of 9. So, but if you ever have any questions, we are more than happy to hear you, answer you. There are things we cannot talk about, but we're happy when people come to our meetings. Any other old or new business? Mr. Del Greco?
Just on that topic, and if you can correct me if I'm wrong, right? Some people might comment on at Mr. Darian, Mr. Del Greco, they might ask for multiple comments from multiple of us. Is it true that if we have more than 5 comments on the same thread, it's considered violation of sunshine?
You have to be careful of that. So you're allowed one-way communication. So if you provide information out, that's accurate and it's the board position. 5 people can say yes and send it out. But when it's with a two-way conversation where now it looks like you're having a discussion and taking action, you can't do that if there's a quorum of the board, because it has to be noticed and it has to be here as a public board meeting.
Thank you for that clarity.
Which is what I spoke about at the beginning of the meeting. We cannot take action without a quorum. Our quorum is 5. So if we have 4 people here, we can't take a vote on anything. We can talk about things, so it really doesn't mean anything. If I send out an email, or the superintendent, we will send out maybe an information email to the entire board that says maybe, closed session this week. There's no information, if I'm going to send something out, I will say confidential, do not reply to all, because no one can have a conversation without the public with more than 5 members there. And we are very careful with that. So we're just very careful. Mrs. Dorian, did you want to comment?
I just wanted to ask, because on Facebook, I think there has been a post that's asking from particular members to respond, do we need to cover that in policy? Because in our policy, we have always said that the person who speaks for the board is the president and only the president. And so that's kind of what I've lived by.
Right, so I'm going to clarify
I try
that.
not to
So
respond.
I was contacted today that someone was asking questions of board, but I'm not in this group. So Mr. Darian had said something, and I asked Mr. Darian to just give the factual thing. There was a question, I think, with all question answers, and I just said, please just state factually that we went further into school. I wanted to keep it at the board level, but board level and attorney questions will be answered. That was already out in the public, and I just asked him to do it for me, because I'm not in there, but we should have this discussion in
But yes,
policy.
board position
We
that's
should.
not just repeating what has, or the action that's already been taken, board position can only come from the board president or the superintendent. But if the board's already taken action, you're just kind of repeating it and just providing that report to the public, that you can comment on. Unless you do a disclaimer and say, this is just my opinion.
But you did say the board position, and no individual board member should represent the board position. You could represent your position as an individual, as a community member, as a parent, and you can talk about facts that are not confidential, that is in the public eye, that particular person may not be aware of. So as an example.
But make us sure there's a disclaimer on that, though. So you need to make it clear
Yes.
that this is my opinion or my perception.
And that you don't represent the board, which you have
Right.
put out there.
But like if someone had questions about the budget, I could say, oh, by the way, the budget is located here, and give them direction to the website.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other old or new business? Okay, so, I'll allow it. Technically, after we open to the public,
Apologies.
and people don't like this, but going forward, we will follow our, we're pretty open, but yes, please
Understood.
ask us.
So, is it, do we have to be social media, like, part of these groups where you feel like you have
No.
to respect? Right, so.
Not at all.
To avoid that, and since you guys get a lot of heat from concerned parents, I mean, not at all, right? Absolutely not. And since we should direct them to the board via email so that it could get, addressed properly, maybe a suggestion would be not to participate in these social media groups.
So I'd like to draw an analogy. So I like skiing, and I'm at the bottom of the ski slope. And, I was told not to play in the snow, so I can't make the snowball at the top of the mountain. But I see the snowball coming, and sometimes I have to do something to try to avoid it from crashing into my location at the bottom of the hill. And so, I agree that we shouldn't get involved, and I agree that the conversation shouldn't be there, but if I don't do anything, if I don't push the snowball left or right or try to do whatever it is, it's going to come crashing, and it's going to be my problem. And that's what, people in the community are saying, like, well, we don't know what's going on, and you guys don't say anything, and okay, now you know why, but the problem though is that we get these exaggerated events.
Right. So I also think maybe because of your previous comment saying that you don't have to respond if you don't want to. I believe that was a little bit earlier. You said we don't have to bring up, whatever we don't want to. So maybe that's why the community is coming down, because of a specific comment that you made. So
Let me get into that.
Sure.
So that's how public board meetings run.
Right.
In the entire state by Robert's rules. It is a public comment session. It is from state level to federal. This is how it works. You go to many board members, they have their attorney every time. People come up, the attorney says, sorry, we're not answering. So this is how it works. I know the public doesn't like it, parents don't like it, but if any of you come on here, this is how you're going to be. Like, this is how it works in public. But like I said before, this board is pretty open. When we get questions, like if we do try to answer, and if we don't know, we ask our admin to figure it out and get back to the parents. So we are open to it. We do, but we do like to say, like when people come up, like, because some people have never been to a board. They have they think they're going to come and they're going to ask us, so what's in this budget line? It doesn't work that way. So I like to put out there that, you have 3 minutes to speak, and it is a public comment session only. If we choose to respond, we will. Most of the time we do. But a lot of boards don't. But that is just how public boards work.
Again, agree.
Yeah.
But to, if you're feeling that you're getting bullied, then my suggestion would be, don't push the snowball. Just, leave it as snowflakes.
So just as full disclosure, I have a higher risk tolerance than most in this, and most rational people would not get involved. I I'm always.
I'm going to give you 2 minutes because here's another thing with public forum is you can only direct your comments to me. So I'm going to let you answer and then we're going to shut
Okay.
this part down.
So I tend to, not push the envelope, but, understand that there's risks, and I'm willing to take those risks, but I'm not saying or suggesting that it's the advised path here at the board. But I just see that, there is an opportunity to help clear the air, and, wherever sometimes I think it's worth the risk. And sometimes the risk is, I get criticized for it.
Go ahead. It's only 10 o'clock. Go ahead.
Sorry. So I am actually one of the admins of the Oradell residents and parents advocacy group. I got involved in advocacy in 2014 when I lost my first daughter to stillbirth. Social media and support groups have brought great healing in that perspective to me. And I wanted to have a page where we could come together, everybody. So I would like to really thank Mr. Darian for stepping up to the plate. We would love for everybody to be there, and I understand that there are legal things.
We cannot.
That's fine. But once maybe something public is finally out there, it would be great to have somebody respond and say, this is the minutes, they're out there. Take a look if you have questions. Maybe if somebody has a question that they could be answered appropriately. And then we wouldn't have to worry about all of the talk. This is really meant to empower families to get involved because, right, nobody ever comes to these meetings. So that's the whole purpose of that, was to join our community together. There's nothing on there that you guys can't see. We've let board members into it. Again, there's going to be a few people who are going to be naysayers. There's going to be bullies. There always are. So, we try to manage it to make sure those things don't happen, but we also don't want to stifle freedom of speech, as well as, have the real questions and concerns out there. It's a public forum. It is private. There are answers that people have to answer in order to come into it. It would be great to get a statement from the Board of Ed every so often, updating the group about things that have been passed or things that have been publicly done, because not all parents can come to these meetings. To be honest with you, I left a crying child, a hungry child, to come here tonight. And it's, like you said, 10 o'clock. Not all parents have that luxury. We can't do these meetings on Zoom. The videotapes sometimes are impossible to hear. And again, taking time to do that. So sometimes communication is evolving, right? We don't just want emails anymore. We don't just want letters. We don't want to have to attend meetings. We want a quick fix. And sometimes that's using social media. And I think that we need to kind of update ourselves a little bit and make sure that, like I said, once in a while somebody pops on and says, here's some information, from the Board of Ed. That would be wonderful to hear.
So really, I don't think we can do that. We would do it either through like the school, or we would have to tell the whole community. We cannot just be reporting to a small group. It would have to be to everybody.
Okay, but
so that-
even if it's something that has already been publicly, like let's just say the minutes of last week's meeting or 2 weeks ago meeting has been published, everybody has it. At that point, could you then say, something about whatever it is that has been already discussed?
Catherine, what does school board say about this?
I've heard different things about what to do at school boards. School boards
Very
is-
opposed to a lot of this.
Yeah, because you have to be really, really careful. You can make the disclaimer, but not everyone accepts that that's the disclaimer. They still hold you liable for everything that you put down in print. And they think that, okay, no, and you'll find this everywhere as parents on the board. Everywhere you walk, you are no longer a parent. You're a board member. You've taken a different leap. And so New Jersey School Boards is really asking everyone to be very careful about being involved with other groups. I happen to like to participate in groups, and at least my kids would call me the stalker, but I listen to what is going on so that it makes me think. I may not respond to it, but at least I know about it. It's kind of like a parent saying something to me on the ball field, and if I don't know anything about it and they don't want to go through the chain of command, I'll share the information, because that's what we do as board members. Is if there's something brewing, we let the administration know about it so that they are prepared for anything that comes down the pike. And so that's kind of what school boards has said to do, not to jump in.
Yeah,
So-
no, again, that's exactly why this was meant, for transparency, for collaboration. Unfortunately, again, like I said, there's always the naysayers, there's always the ones that cause problems. We try to keep that to a minimum, but you're right, there's a lot of information out there that is incorrect, and not all of us have that expertise. Not all of us know about budgets and school boards and things like that. So as much solid information that we can get and that we can provide to this community, it's actually very helpful in communication.
I would like to just say one thing. I think sometimes people send me things from the group. I'm usually working. I'm just like, oh my God. I think what I would ask the community, you and your group, whatever, is to not assume the worst all the time, because that's what happens in these closed groups. It's always, I think the assumption has to be from the top, the board has your children's best interests at heart always, okay? Moving to the superintendent and the admins. They are professionals. They are legally trained. They have gone through all the state mandated things. Because you may not see something, I would ask the community to say, always assume the best. And until you have proof of something different, don't assume the worst. Now, if you get proof of the worst, that's different. I'd rather people just assume the best, know that people are working for you. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on this. I'm going to open it up to the board. But look, we're human. We always tend to go to, look, I do it with the town council. I'm like, what are they doing? But there's always more information behind the scenes that they have that I'm not going to get. So I would just ask people not to assume the worst. Mr. Del Greco, did you?
Yeah, and just remember, like, we're your neighbors, right? We have kids that are classmates, right? We've been here since 5 o'clock, right? So it's been a long day.
I've been here before then.
I mean, I do feel that the page celebrates some of that stuff as well.
I hope
and,
so, yeah.
And we try
I'm not saying you don't.
We try to negate some of the negative with positive. We made sure that all of the parents knew about the Teacher of the Year applications, and we made sure that when
great.
Mrs. Hook won, that we celebrated her. So we are trying to definitely make more positive, and I think the more positive things that come, the easier it is for us to comment on those. And a lot of this negativity and assuming that things are bad are coming from the transparency issues. So, but it's good that you see it. Yeah.
Still, that doesn't mean that it's bad. And
I am one to always
you
look
have
for
like the greatest
positive
attitude. How
intent.
many years have you been in education? 28. 27? Whoa, 26, 27, 28. Look at that. I couldn't bet on that if it happened. Like, we have professionals here. And they are raked over the coals. They will tell you. They are raked over the coals by us. So, I just want people to have trust in our admins that they are professionals, they are trained, and just to try to always assume it. And if you have a question, then come ask us. And if we screw up, we will tell you, because it happens.
I just don't want the group to be looked at as something so negative, because like I
No, I'm
said,
not in it, so I don't know.
social media is an amazing way to communicate with each other.
Absolutely.
It's a great way to join forces. And
Absolutely.
like I said, in one of my worst times of my life, after losing a child,
Absolutely.
I found peace and
100%.
camaraderie in using a group like that.
Yeah,
So that's the
100%.
purpose. And if everybody can kind of remember that it's not going to be a raking, although I'm sure that some people will do that,
Of course.
the main community isn't doing that.
And we appreciate you coming and representing your group.
Okay,
Thanks for
thank you.
coming. Is anyone else from the board?
Can I just say something?
Mrs. Norman.
I know we celebrate our administrators and all the years, and our staff and all the years that they've been on the board. And I think that we need to acknowledge that we're committed board members as well. Some of us have been around for a period of time, some not quite so long, but everybody has the interest of the children of Oradell as their top priority. That's why we're here. That's why we keep coming here, is for the kids.
Anyone else from the board? From the board? I'm going to start calling you 26, 27, 28 from now on. That's it. I didn't even know this. I'll be like, hey, 27, how you doing?
You'll have to change it every year.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Ms. Bozios?
I think the one piece that I'm taking from this is many people know that the reason I chose to become superintendent, apply to become superintendent of Oradell Public is because while I was the principal, I worked with 7 superintendents. And I felt that while being superintendent wasn't initially in my game plan, my goal was to bring whatever strengths I had to make this community better. And so I said, well, I can't do it as principal with the rotating door of superintendents that happens in small districts, because people go to a small district to be a superintendent and then they say, let me parlay that into a big job with a big salary somewhere else. And that's not me. My superintendent mentors tell me it should be me. They tell me I'd love it. I would miss children. I hear children, I see children, it's incredibly important to me. Now, the flaw of that I'm hearing tonight is that I have been here for 13 years. And so when Mrs. Boshart brought up the energy savings, I sat through so many meetings where we talked about that when you're somewhere a long time, it becomes the assumed and you don't know. So if people in the community have questions about things like that, if you ask me, it lets me know that that's something we need to be more transparent on. Because sometimes it's not that we're not trying to be transparent, we don't realize that that's the information the community is looking for. So even with that one, the reason I opened up our new website is sometimes on a website people have a section about things to know about the district. And I was like, well, that might be something to add to this website that is just base level information that I know because even before I was superintendent, I sat through a lot of board meetings. And I'm not going to know what that information is from the community unless you tell me. This is the information. It's what the benefit of the conversation I had about the crisis protocols was. We have a lot of that. We can do a better job of sharing some of that. And honestly, that part's not so hard. I just need help sometimes from the community with regards to, hey, this is the issue. Because what I know about this board is that they are always driven to get better, even sometimes when that drives me crazy, because they push. The most offensive comment I've ever had sitting here is that this board rubber stamps my decisions, because I will tell you, I wish they would rubber stamp one of my decisions. There is no rubber stamping ever going on here. But the thing I know is that they are committed to making this district the best it can be. And so is my administrative team, and so is every teacher here. If there's something missing, help us to get better.
Okay, I'm assuming no more old or new business. Okay, I hate to do this to the board, but we do need to go back into closed session quick. We are going into closed session. We will not be coming out and taking any action, so thank you for coming. We very much appreciate it.
I make a motion that we go into closed session.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Del Greco. Roll call.
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nickel.
Yes.